Okay.
Oh
Are we
yeah, and
all
don't
here?
say the N-word.
Oh yeah, guys. No N words, please. If it happens, you'll be banned permanently. Um. Okay. So Vosh, again, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I think a lot of people are here really excited to talk to you for a lot of reasons. We've got a lot of. I'm sure you've noticed. We've got a lot of conservacox on here, a lot of fascies.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of.
Um,
I've heard the rumors. I'm delighted to
yeah,
have the opportunity to mix it up yet again.
I'd like you to re-educate them for me because they're very frustrating to do. Um, so, guys, for those of you who haven't been to an AMA here before, it's pretty simple. There's an AMA questions text channel, in this like right above the voice channel. Type your questions in there. Add a VC to the end of your question if you want to speak to Vosh directly. If you troll in voice, I'm just going to ban you permanently. Your question will be pinned by Mod, and Alt and I will be picking through the questions to see if there are
Hi.
anything good is in there. Please keep all the discussion of the AMA in the AMA discussion channel and out of the question channel. So with that, Vosh, why don't you give us an introduction for people here who don't know who you are?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my name is not my real name, of course, but I go by Vosh. I'm a YouTuber who talks about politics. I'm a socialist and an anarchist. Having a great time with it. A lot of fun, you know. Thanks to my found profession, coronavirus and quarantine aren't hurting me too much. Got lots of free time on my hands. It's been a grand old time, and yeah, just happy to be here. Love talking to folks.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Our first question is going to be from Safety Comrade. Safety Comrade, you're unmuted. Go for it.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
Oh, geez. Okay, hold on. I was doing math for a second. Okay, I
That's
just wanted to
bad.
make sure my
Nerd.
math was.
Yeah,
Oh,
what a
fuck you.
loser.
I needed to do math for my question because it's complex and about policy.
Stop it.
Oh,
All right,
God.
so
Uh-oh.
you support Bernie Sanders, but his policies are economically unsound. Why would you support a candidate that wants to raise the federal deficit over $20 trillion over the next 10 years?
With regards to what policies specifically?
So, for example, if you add up all the policies on his page from Medicare for All to universal housing, right? I'm going by how he plays for his major plans. If you add it up, it comes to about 70 trillion, and he proposes about 40 trillion or I guess that would be 30 trillion, to pay for that. He doesn't come up with another 30 trillion to fill in the gap. That would be completely economically unsound and would drive us further into national debt. Not on the private level, but federal spending alone.
Yeah, so a few points here. I can't double check your math. I was under the impression that studies have found Medicare for All would actually save the government money in the long run for a wide variety of reasons. I can't speak exactly to the specifics when it comes to finances here. Everyone seems to have like a different barroom napkin estimation of how much everything's going to cost. But I'll say this broadly. First of all, everything that Bernie Sanders proposes would be in a well-stratified system where we take account and tax all the wealth that comes through this country, completely affordable. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. I'm very, very confident that we can implement relatively milquetoast soaked-in policies without destroying the very fabric of our society. I'm not an economics major. I've gotten some estimations from other people who are economics majors. I'd have to go over and cross-compare. But more broadly speaking, I don't necessarily think there's much of an issue with raising the deficit, particularly in the short term. And national debt isn't also necessarily a bad thing. Usually national debt can be a leveraging tool because it means that other countries have an investment in the worth of the dollar. After all, if everyone is owed umpteen trillion US dollars, they don't exactly benefit from the dollar being made worthless. It's a way of ensuring everyone's mutually codependent when it comes to finances. There are definitely some issues with Bernie's economic policy that I have. I'm not a protectionist, for example. I'm very much like a globalist or an internationalist, if I wanted to be real fancy about it. But I don't think that his economic policies would be particularly destructive. And I think that the benefits of his presidency would well compensate for the problems I have with his protectionist policies.
Well, there's a problem with this because what these studies are accounting for is total spending within the private sphere. Currently, what the government is currently spending in terms of the ACA, we're only spending about $1 trillion over the next 10 years. What Bernie Sanders' policy is proposing to do is to take all that private spending and give it to the government. So the government would be spending upwards of $32 trillion from $1 trillion, and he's only proposing to pay for half of that. The reason why this would be dangerous is because, one, the national debt is being paid over time with interest. What you're talking about is taking vastly more loans out in a short period of time, raising the federal interest, which might put the U.S. on track to default.
Okay, so pretty much every economist paper I've read on this has indicated that everyone's assumptions as to how our interest rates, or like how our inflation and interest would like work with regards to increased like borrowing and spending have been just wrong. Our inflation and interest rates right now are doing like pretty spectacularly. The reason why our interest rates are so low is because we're not experiencing the inflation that we kind of expected to experience, and that's one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve is comfortable printing off trillions of dollars to help like shortfall these businesses. One of the reasons why the spending is being transferred from the private sector to the government, like this isn't the government taking on more debt necessarily. It all comes around. Before, those trillions of dollars were being spent by U.S. citizens. The U.S. citizens have to pay for their insurance policies. The insurance policies act as sort of a middleman, inflating the price of the actual health coverage. With the government taking care of things and insurance companies abolished, the total amount of money spent on healthcare would actually decrease. There are also long-term societal benefits that you get from having a broader healthcare coverage. For example, because there's more availability of preventative care, it's less likely that diseases or ailments are going to exacerbate themselves to the extent that they require surgery or severe reparative care. And that's one of the issues we have right now with our healthcare system. Healthcare is so expensive that when people feel a little bump or they get a little ache, they don't go to the doctor because they can't afford it. And then 2 years down the line, it ends up costing $300,000 in surgery. The money isn't like coming out of nowhere. It's just being transferred from a less efficient sector to a more efficient sector. As it stands, the existence of insurance companies are just a flat factual detriment to our economic and societal prosperity.
Well, there are two problems with that. One, no, we've been slowly introducing money into the economy. Right now, the Federal Reserve holds on to this money. It's not like they're printing out mass amounts. And at the same time, these are loans. These loans will be paid back over time with TARP. And what happens with this money is that it's being used, it's paid back, and then put back into storage. It's not like this money is out there forever. So these trillions of dollars will eventually be brought back in. That's why inflation isn't going crazy. And when the government is spending, we're spending a little amount over time. We're talking about increasing it in a short period of time by a lot. And a lot of this money is going out into the economy and not being brought back in. That is the main problem. Also, a universal healthcare system like for that of Canada or other countries like that have a private system and a public system work far better than countries that have tried like a completely universal healthcare system. Like Canada did try this at one point. It just wasn't fiscally possible. It put too much of a strain on the government. That's why they had to open it up to a private system too.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the history of the development of the healthcare system in Canada, and I think that's just a factually incorrect interpretation of what took place. This is an incredibly complicated government policy. To simplify it as, well, they tried Medicare for all and it didn't work is pretty reductive. The idea that Medicare for all costs more than the existing healthcare system that we have now is factually incorrect. And what's more, just because the loans that the Federal Reserve is currently printing off will eventually be returned and made solvent back to the government, doesn't mean that people initially had fears that they would increase the inflation rate. Ultimately, I don't think, we can talk about the specifics of like the hurdles that the implementation of Medicare for all would face, but I think at least from the numbers that I've read, and again, there's a lot of math out there, I don't have all of it at my fingertips.
All right.
From the numbers that I've read, it seems fairly compelling a case.
All right, I've got to wrap it up for a second, but all I'll say is that you're taking all this private debt and you're pushing it onto the government. You're increasing it vastly. That's something that the system cannot handle. All right, that's all I'll say.
And
Sure.
thank you, Safety. It's much too early for math, but thank you anyway. Next question is from Lulu. Lulu, you are unmuted. Go for it.
Hi, so I have watched your videos and you say that you are a racial abolitionist.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know if you think that we need to destroy the concept of race in order to stop the perpetuation of disenfranchisement, white supremacy, and oppression necessarily.
Yeah, I think racial abolitionism is just the long-term consequence of an egalitarian society. I want a society ultimately where people where people are regarded and treated only for the content of their character. I mean, that's a pretty long-standing, like, that's what MLK said, right? But ultimately, if we aren't judging people by their race, the idea of race kind of falls apart. Our modern conceptualization of race is only a few hundred years old. There are other systems of racial stratification that are now completely outdated. Like they'd be silly, to even think about. Like what the Romans thought about race. If you tried to apply that to modern standards, it'd be ludicrous, Scientific racism is kind of the name of the game right now, but as that falls to the wayside, I feel like we should collectively realize, like, hey, maybe instead of replacing this with some milquetoast neoliberal neutered perspective on race where we're all different but we're all the same, really, we just get rid of it conceptually and we treat skin color and, I don't know, nose shape or what type of eyelid you have as impartially and meaninglessly as we treat what your eye color is or what your hair color is or how tall you are, other phenotypical distinctions that don't carry with them a racial connotation.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu. Okay, next question is from let's go with Dr. Gushku. What is the most similar nation that exists today that is governed by your preferred political ideology, and why don't you live there?
Oh, well, okay, so for a number of reasons. I was born in America. I'm a good old American boy. Just because I like something else doesn't mean I'm going to move there. I'm a good old US of A boy, okay? And you could, I mean, this is a silly kind because you could say like, oh, you like fascism, huh? Well, why aren't you moving to Hungary right now? It's a meaningless question, fundamentally. There are no countries today that I think are a good representation of the market socialist society that I advocate for in the immediate term. I don't think the material conditions are quite right just yet for that to come about. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong or hypocritical about proposing changes to a society that haven't been successfully implemented yet. After all, if people haven't, if we excised any advocacy for systems which have not yet been successfully implemented, we would never be able to implement any better systems because nobody would ever be able to advocate for them before they're tried and they succeed. So ultimately there's that. I mean, Rojava did like their pretty like sick like anarchist commune shit for a while. And that's good and I respect that. But I like we currently I think seeing that project can't really sustain itself at the moment with so many foreign hostile actors like near them. So maybe we need to wait a little bit longer before we try anarchism.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Next question is from Cherubin Ho. What are your thoughts on gender abolition?
Gender abolitionism?
That's right.
I'm a gender abolitionist. Gender's pretty cringe. Essentially, the reason why I'm a gender abolitionist is because I feel that gender doesn't have any meaningful definition outside its roles and expectations. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? Well, you can make broad determinate statements. Like, for example, being a man means being strong. Being a woman means being dainty. Well, what if you're not a strong man? What if you're not a dainty woman? The existence of those expectations are going to hamper you in a wide variety of ways. It's going to make it difficult for you to find acceptance, at least more so than it would for other people, because you're not adhering to the expectations people have of you. Ultimately, gender cannot exist without some sort of oppressive reification of social expectation. And as we get rid of those expectations, as we have been for the past few decades, I think ultimately the concept of gender is going to become more and more meaningless. Eventually, maybe, that means it will no longer exist at all.
Great. So the next question is from Full Metal Juggernaut. What is the best way to deal with race realists?
I still haven't done this stream because I'm a lazy piece of shit. But
Nice.
I've read everything on race realism now. I've engaged with every molecule of data on the subject. There's so many. So race realists are NPCs who have talking points the same way a flat earther or a anti-vaxxer would. It's not actually like this academic field. It's what they try to make it sound like is there's a academic discipline of biology that's raising questions on race that are making the SJWs nervous. It's not. The numbers and the conclusions across the scientific space are pretty concrete. They have some, they like these repeat phrases though. Like a really good one is, well, you can see racial differences. Like you can see people are different. which is, of course, a wildly unscientific way of determining racial distinctions. Just because people look different or have different phenotypical traits doesn't mean there's inherently a racial boundary there. I look nothing like my brother, but we're both, Western European, more or less. There are people like, this is a very common one, what? So you think evolution stops at the neck? Like, so your body, so like your skin color evolves differently, but your brain stays the same? The answer to which is, of course, that skin color, nose shape, and other stuff like that are single or close to single genome traits that are heavily affected by environmental stimuli, whereas the brain is an incredibly polygenetic, like an incredibly complex polygenetic system that requires a much longer period of time to change meaningfully. So essentially, like, I need to do my stream on this, but like every like non sequitur talking point they have is easily met with a response. It's just a matter of knowing that data.
Excellent. Okay, so kind of going on that, esoteric paternalism wants to know what's your opinion on the heritability of IQ? So more specific question.
Heritability in a biological term doesn't mean genetic passing down. Heritability means the degree to which a change within a specific population can be accounted for due to genetic variables, which are two very different things. So here's a good example. Wait, you said heritability, correct?
Yes, I did.
My apologies, I misspoke. Not even due to genetic variables, then. Just the proportion of change within a given population which relates to genetic, like for example, say for example you have a mom and a dad, and the mom had her arm cut off some time ago. I don't know why, maybe a car accident or something. All right, and then they have themselves some kids, and the kids, believe it or not, have two arms apiece. That would be a non-heritable trait right there. Likewise, skin color have varying degrees of heritability because the alleles, the expression of the phenotype, can vary depending on a wide variety of random characteristics that take place during the transposition of like genetic material from a parent to offspring. When people talk about heritability, they're not talking about something that can like succinctly and deductively determine whether or not genes are actually like a part of the equation. I'll give the simplest example for this. Okay, IQ has a fair degree of heritability. So if you have parents who have low IQ, there's a decent chance that the kids are going to have low IQ too. Or you can explain like a given percentage of the IQ is going to be accounted for based on the heritability from the parents. But that heritability doesn't have to be genetic. That heritability can just be because both the parents and the kids grew up in a house with lead paint. I mean, after all, if you're born to a house in lead paint, if you grew up in a house with lead paint, then you have kids and they're going to grow up in that same house. I mean, that's highly heritable, but that has nothing to do with your actual genetic potential. It's just the fact of the matter that those characteristics, that which led to the lower IQ, were transmittable from one generation to another. The heritability would change if they moved houses. In short, heritability doesn't mean what a lot of people pretend it means. Sorry, I took way too long to get to that. I need to go over my research again,
Sure. No, thank you. So Esoteric actually wants to talk to you, so he's unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, the entire thing is that when it comes to heritability, it isn't necessarily just talking about the differences that can be seen between populations and how much of that difference can be accounted through let's say basically like what's passed on from let's say parent to child. And while you are right in basically putting out that this is not necessarily a genetic mechanistic explanation, it would not be something that's let's say tantamount to something like let's say fucking lead paint. Those things are usually done in terms of, let's say, regression, in which you try to account for factors that actually correlate to outcomes. And when those things are accounted for, we tend to see that IQ actually tends to have higher heritability than what's usually expected, when we would actually presume that opposite to be the case if, let's say, IQ was more so molded by the environment.
Yeah, this is what you're saying right now is factually incorrect. I've gone over the data on this. The correlative differences in IQ, like varying between races and different populations, absolutely.
Who said race?
Huh?
Who said race?
because I'm speaking generally. We don't have to speak just of race. We can speak of other differences in groups. These differences are flatten out tremendously when we begin to account for environmental factors that would factor into heritability. Some characteristics pertaining to heritability, such as, for example, parental level of education, or like what environment you grew up in, or as I said, like lead paint in houses. These are things that factor into heritability because these are usually conditions that are going to transmit from parent to child. But that doesn't mean it has anything to do fundamentally with their brains or with their genetic potential. It just has to do with environmental factors. As you account for those factors, that curve flattens tremendously.
No, we actually see the opposite. When you account for, let's say, factors that actually fucking change your, let's say, outcome in terms of IQ, such as lead, or such as, let's say, basically nutrition or so on and so forth, IQ heritability actually tends to increase. And specifically OECD countries where basically all of these factors tend to be mitigated due to the health standards that OECD countries tend to have. Those factors, in those nations, heritability seems to be, let's say, on average 70%. Whereas in comparison to, let's say, fucking African nations where heritability is seen to be like 40% on average. So
Okay, again,
I don't know where
heritability
hold
doesn't
up.
directly
I don't know
correlate.
I don't know where exactly you're getting this, let's say, almost factually incorrect belief that somehow heritability flattens out in terms of basically the outcomes that you see within given population.
The
And this
only
is not
reason,
based, wait,
the
and
only
this is not
reason
between,
heritability wouldn't
just
flatten
Oh my
one
God.
second.
All right.
This is not between populations. So let's not even bring in race. We can just talk about the distinction between one person in a singular neighborhood of the same ethnicity towards another. That's it. So let's just work with that hypothetical and basically say, how would heritability work in that scenario? What would be your opinion?
Because
Sorry, I'm just fucking dealing with something in the back.
because for one, heritability, the population that you're testing within is usually very narrowly defined. Heritability is usually used to describe differences within like genetically similar individuals, because if you're not doing that, you don't actually know what confounding variables there are to account for. Usually, like, heritability is relevant in like parent-child or like twin studies. These are usually when heritability is biologically relevant as a term. People who use it between populations is pretty cringe true. If we're talking very specifically about the accountants of confounding variables with regards to heritability between parent and child, then I could maybe see an argument that that wouldn't flatten out heritability because it would account for things that are otherwise disrupting the heritability curve. Like, so for example, if both parent and child have their IQ kerplunked by 10, but then you get rid of that, you account for that factor, and now you recognize that the very slim difference that they have between their IQs and, say, for example, the person that the parent married might be accounted for more significantly due to genetic differences because you no longer have any other factors that are like playing with that. I could see that. But when it comes to comparing between like broader groups, the fact of the matter is that heritability is an almost it's almost useless as a term to meaningfully describe or explain differences between different groups of people.
So I think that basically your main contention with heritability, and I apologize if like there was some sound in the background. I was dealing with the call.
You sound fine.
Yeah. So your main contention with heritability is specifically how it can be perhaps utilized when it's comparing groups that live necessarily in different conditions, and that when you account for those different conditions, heritability actually indicates that the distinction in their outcome is necessarily flatlined, right?
Yeah, I mean, heritability as it is incredibly shaky as a metric to determine variance between populations. So with regards to that comparative study, like, or with those comparative studies, the getting rid of those confounding variables would flatten that curve because there is a much greater likelihood of non-genetic confounding traits to be found the larger and the more distinct the groups we're looking at are.
I'm gonna have to end after this. I'm probably taking up too much time as it is. But like, for example, if we just say, let's say a population that's within the same given area compared to another population, like one zip code next, because that is how populations are to some degree subdivided when it's not done on the basis of, let's say, race or ethnicity or so on and so forth. We can still find out basically heritable differences despite them having like predominantly the same factors that are actually, I guess, put upon them that would
Not
affect their
really.
outcomes, right?
Biologists would never use heritability, just like to describe people by their neighborhood based on their.
No, I never said biologist. A psychologist that predominantly do with heritability.
So, heritability is typically using in the field of breeding and genetics. If there's like a different definition of heritability by psychologists that I'm not aware of, then sure. But I'm sure psychologists would also agree that just because you live in the same neighborhood as somebody doesn't mean you're part of the same population meaningfully. After all, just because you live in the same neighborhood doesn't mean that you have same like experiential conditions, generational trauma, and excuse me, generational income inequality can have huge impacts on like general IQ that would show up in heritability studies, but would not like meaningfully mean you could be compared like on a population level alongside people who haven't had those same experiences.
I'm gonna end right now. So the entire thing is, I just want to say thank you for basically answering my question.
I love you.
It really did actually add a
Aw.
lot, and I just want to, yeah. And by the way, the reason I say psychologist is because biologists don't really tend to do much with IQ unless it's in relation to like fucking MRI studies or whatever. But that's whatever. Well, thanks for answering, man.
No
I
problem.
appreciate it.
Cool.
All right.
Okay. Next question is gonna be from Fiji. Vash, how would you think that this ongoing pandemic would affect the U.S. election coming in November?
Initially, I thought it might. Initially, I thought it might hurt Trump because Trump has like objectively dropped the ball on every conceivable level, and I think that Trump's response is a really good indication of how fascists are fundamentally incapable of maintaining a stable government because they can't like rationally assess the threat different outside factors pose. You know, like he has to keep his rallies going. His cult of personality can't survive like a measured, calm, collected, severe response. But now the more I think about it, I think it's actually going to help Trump because this is a hell country and we deserve to be like nuked. I think this is.
Wow.
I think his right now his popularity rating is as high as it's been in a long time. And pandemics or other like crises tend to get people to like mobilize behind the incumbent president. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that I thought before all of this that Trump would beat Biden. Right now, I think that Trump is going to obliterate Biden. It's not even going to be close.
Cool. Okay, next question is from Yogg You are unmuted. Go for it.
Excellent. So I've long since been sold on the socialism memes. It would make my high school self cringe, but it's true. But I'm yet to be sold on the anarchy memes. Like the I don't know. I just haven't seen a case for them. It built up beyond sort of the philosophical what gives the government the right to dictate what someone does. Obviously, the sort of consent of the governed thing is, a bit of a meme. Doesn't really work that way, unfortunately. No one willingly gives their consent. But I don't really see a way to sort of feasibly implement it. I know it's a super basic argument, perhaps a touch banal, but just by virtue of people, you have disparate factions, two factions sort of unite. Jesus, what are you doing on stream? Sorry if I'm taking my time here.
What?
Oh, I was imitating the wind noises because you were blowing into the mic when you talk. But it's endearing,
Yeah.
and I like your voice.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm on a headset, unfortunately.
Don't worry about it. What's the question?
So basically, like, I don't
Is
view
there
a
a question?
feasibility. Oh no, there is a question. So basically, like, what is the counter response to the idea that you have ostensibly anarchist society, but two people sort of go, hey, we team up, we can beat these other guys just through unity. Some other people team up. Eventually, everybody sort of teams up. To be so crass.
So essentially, how to keep anarchism from turning into neo-feudalism with a bunch of warlords running around, like replacing the absence of violence with their own.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, pretty much, more or less.
Yeah, so I just want to say I am an anarcho-syndicalist, but there's a reason why I don't advocate for anarcho-syndicalist positions on stream that much. I usually just very tepidly describe my appreciation for that ideology. And the reason for that is A, because optically, rhetorically, and pragmatically, it's better to advocate for something that's more immediately reachable. And B, more, I think, substantially, because because I'm not comfortable advocating for something that I am not 100% good on, advocating for, 100% clear on my support for. In my opinion, a society after the abolition of the commodity form, a society after a seizure of the means of production, is going to be so radically different from the society in which we live today that it's very difficult for me to make prescriptive judgments about what type of society would work best after that point in time. It's a point that I can't fathom, really. And I imagine that the politics that I have for such a society now would be as laughably outdated then as the imagined future societies of Catholic priests during the medieval period would have had for their future. With regards to anarchism, though, it should be noted, the absence of a state doesn't mean the absence of a government. Every philosophy of anarchism comes with some idea as to how human government should be organized. As an anarcho-syndicalist, I'm of the opinion, for example, that the governing bodies should be massive super unions, syndicates, that unify the democratic will of the citizenry along with the productive capacity of the workers. We rather than separating the economic and the political sort of decision making, we unify them together into a gigantic government conglomerate. And there would be many such syndicates, and I imagine they would sort of collectively work as an sort of an operative disseminator of will and of government power. A state is a pretty specific socio-political system that entails with it the monopoly on violence. But I do think that even without a state, you could have law, you could have jails if you wanted them, you could have people who enforce laws. It's just a matter of placing the incentivizations and the responsibilities in the right place to ensure a minimization of power differential.
Okay, interesting. I'm surprised to hear that even you two have some minor doubts about your exact political alignment as far as like anarchy is concerned.
Yeah, I'm always open to having my mind changed on stuff like that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff I could go to understand further, and there's probably a lot of room that I'd have to like grow as a person into appreciating and distinguishing between those ideologies a little more.
Oh yeah, no, it's certainly like absolutely commendable. Highly respect that.
Cool.
I don't think I have anything much else to say other than I saw something about Hyena playing Skullgirls. You should totally do that with viewers. I'd love to give my squealy try on stream sometime. All right.
You know, the funny thing is that my girlfriend actually like has a 50-50 shot of kicking my ass at Skullgirls, like in other fighting games. The bumps that I have in my skull keep me from learning how to play fighting games, except for Smash Bros. Properly. She can actually probably whoop my ass in that. She plays double.
Oh well, I mean, I thought about playing it, but then I realized I didn't want to play a shit character. So you know.
Okay.
Anyway,
Thank you, Mr. Yaga. I
thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Have a good one. Sarah Bellamain, by the way.
Okay. Shlomo, you're next. Go for it.
All right. So I just have two questions.
Yo.
My first question would be, of course, regarding that of what do you think is the most efficient means of preventing specific demographics of people, such as white conservatives, from voting in America?
As fun as it would be to go full authoritarian, I believe that enfranchisement is a human right, even if the opinions of these people are like disgusting. I don't think we should work to disenfranchise them. I think that culturally we should try to convince people to change their minds, and that we can do so, I think, through a wide variety of means. But the idea of just like trying to disenfranchise them doesn't really sit right with me. There's no way that I can objectively know whether or not the positions I take are correct, and for me to just like try to like just axe their ability to affect policy, even if in the short term it would lead to a better America, would probably in the long term come back to bite me. So
just wait real quickly. Hypothetically speaking, what if we were to say have a policy of which would say, I don't know, make Puerto Rico a state and do a bunch of other things of which would necessarily disenfranchise them in a way of which they're currently doing towards that of left-wingers? Would you not be supportive of that then? If it's
that's not disenfranchisement. That's enfranchisement. Getting the Puerto Ricans up in here, getting a path to citizenship for the illegal immigrants in this country so they can all vote. I mean, some of these folks have been here decades. Like they're as much of a citizen as I am, as far as I'm concerned. Oh yeah, absolutely. We should get these people.
Lessen their influence, correct?
I'm sorry?
Lessen their influence, correct?
It's not just a matter of using their influence. I think they're entitled to a vote. They live in this country.
Okay. So then I guess you've answered my question. Then that would obviously be granting most people citizenship.
Yeah,
But
I'm
two,
very much in favor of that.
So then the last question would be, I really don't understand how you think this plays into Trump's hands here. He's already not a particularly popular president, even with the boost that he gets from coronavirus. He also is going to have thousands of people dying in Boomerville, such as Florida. He also is going to have constant media plays where, throughout the election cycle, they're simply going to point to things that he said where the solution, we can't let it be worse than the problem. And then on top of it, you have the fact that Joe Biden's outpolling him in every single way. Can you please clarify how you think this is possibly good for Trump?
I mean, his approval rating has gone up, and it seems like the unearned media he gets from being a dumb fuck has only ever supported him because his followers just like a reporter during a press conference can like lay out a 45-second like series of questions like covering every failure he's ever had as a president concerning coronavirus, and he can respond with, "You're a nasty woman. You smell bad. Fuck you." And I feel like MAGA Twitter would just lose their shit with happiness at their based president for telling her off. I don't know. My faith right now in the electoral process is not particularly high.
That Trump's constituency is that of a bunch of retards, but I'm saying that for the most part, though, it's not as if there are people who voted for Trump and weren't able to be swayed. So I'm presuming if we already know that Trump is not as popular as most other presidents, is already losing in polls to that of Joe Biden, even during that of his handling of the situation of coronavirus, and it's only going to get worse from here. It literally has zero prospects of improving. I don't think that the American public, especially based on the evidence, is just completely unreceptive of any sort of political advocacy against Trump. And that's kind of what it sounds like you're saying. I don't
know. Listen, for all we know, 3 weeks from now, Trump is going to like declare war on China or like fucking missile strike one of their boats and claim that it's for reparations for unleashing the Kung Flu on the rest of the world, and all of America will rally behind him for finally standing up to China. I have no idea. I feel like all the playbooks that we have for managing crises and predicting political outcomes are just at this point like completely useless. We have no way of knowing. Hey, listen, I'm with you, dude. I'm riding with Biden, okay? I'm a Bidenista now. I'm out here kicking malarkey to the curb. If it ends up being the case that Trump's staggering incompetence hurts him electorally, then yeah, sure. I mean, I'm here for it. And it's not like I'm going to be sitting here on my stream like preaching for Trump or anything like that. I'm going to be pushing as hard as I can to, advocate for Biden. As fun as that's going to be.
I mean, I would just leave it at this point. In general, most presidents, or I can't think of a single president actually who got elected for a second term during a period of recession. Seeing as this is highly likely, and also considering the compounding factors, I feel as if it's a lot less likely for Trump to win. But
look, you know what they say: hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Okay, I'll be stockpiling beans and guns, and we can push nonetheless for the hope of a Biden presidency.
Sure thing. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Shalama. Okay, next question is from Sad Boy. Sad Boy, go for it. You're on mute. Sad Boy.
Hey, Vosh. How are you?
Doing great, as always. How about you?
Hello?
Yo.
Yeah, my question is about NASBOLs, and with a coming sort of global recession and possibly even depression, do you think that we'd have a real danger of people who take on leftist viewpoints, but adapt that for sort of white nationalism sort of speaking points, to be able to gain a lot of power and influence across sort of Western countries in the next coming years?
Yeah, I'm well worried about that because excuse me. I'm pretty worried about that because right now, so basically like nobody likes big business. Like nobody likes it. There are like 5 libertarians in this country who like it. Nobody else likes it. The Dems don't like big business. Nazis have never liked big business because it's all globalist, Jew-owned, whatever. And even now prominent Republicans like Charlie Kirk will talk about how they also don't like big business. They're America First nationalists, you know? Yeah, Ben Shapiro likes big business, but nobody likes Ben Shapiro. Except for the people who do. Yeah, the problem is right now is that like fascists need a scapegoat. And right now we have like the 1-2 punch. It's really, really easy to scapegoat immigrants because Americans are stupid and racist, and it's growing increasingly easy to scapegoat like globalist, transnational corporations. And with those two combined, I have a feeling that we're like creating an optimal environment, like a petri dish for Nazbols, like people who are like, hey, yeah, let's get some Medicare for all. Let's take down these big businesses and let's take down all the other parasites that are ruining this country. I feel like we're really opening ourselves up to that, to that. And that's one of the reasons why, even when I started this channel, I never made Nazbol jokes. A lot of socialists, I see this in Chapo Trap House, I see this in their subreddit, I see this on Twitter. People will make Nazbol jokes. Like they're this funny little sub community who can just be mocked because they're inherently contradictory. A Nazi, but a communist? No. I think these are going to be the new wave of reactionaries that we have to deal with. Now, thankfully, they're all stupid because anyone who unironically believes in the principles of Nazbolism or Nazbolality or Strasserism, whatever the fuck you want to call it, simultaneously advocates for the destruction of hierarchy along class lines and the bolstering of hierarchy along non-class lines. And inherently contradictory. At least fascists just want supremacy on all degrees. They preach class collaborationism, so at least they're consistent with that respect. But in this case, there's something we have to deal with.
I think that the real danger is people sort of like Justin Trudeau and the like, who are very handsome and they make pussy wet because they have nice chisel face and stuff, but do horrible things. What he does, the wet and like, that's a real scary thing to think that he kind of put himself in this very like
Obama,
things.
Real presidential 3 million deported. How it is.
Cool.
Like that would be a real danger. But thank you. Thanks for that.
I love you.
Thank you, sad boy. Okay, next question is from. Oh, hey, Flamenco. That's good. Next question is from Big Lundy. I need like that. Next question is from Big Lundy. You're unmuted. Go for it.
Oh man, I am preceding something fun with Flamenco. Hey Vosh, what's going on? I just wanted to ask real quick, just what is your thoughts on leftists constantly like trying to talk about like higher end philosophical concepts? Like for instance, of course, the whole pixie mind wave things that happened recently was a little annoying, just all things involved. I don't, because just on a personal level, my thoughts, I don't think that people should be talking about stuff that they don't know anything about. But I mean, I guess that's just me.
I think that philosophy is universally important and interesting, and I don't have any problem with people discussing it, even if they're having relatively amateurish conversations. That is something I'm okay with. I think, if anything, people overstate the extent to which philosophical consistency is politically relevant. Because it seems to me like political theory as it stands, like political, like realpolitik or whatever, is pretty well situated in the idea that politics is just about power and the dissemination of power and who has more of it and who can wield it best. And I believe in that fundamentally, and that's why I try to get a big channel and talk to as many people as possible, which is a type of power. But people sometimes, I'm calling Rem the bath boy out here, act like philosophical, like grounding is not just a desirable thing, but is also the bedrock of political advocacy, which is fucking ludicrous. Absolutely not. And all the philosophy professors in the world have made less an impact on the political developments of our planet than like a collection of 40 IQ like inbred European nobles who decided to go to war because they wanted to be able to divorce their wives. It always comes back down to power. But I guess like as an intellectual exercise, I think it's excellent that people get involved in philosophy.
I think it's more than just an intellectual exercise, though, isn't it? Because, like, as you say, when you gain a large platform, you gain a decent amount of political power, or at least political standing, when it comes to a lot of different people. So you have a responsibility to use that power responsibly, right? Well, that's my wording there is a little redundant, obviously, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, but philosophy isn't the only discipline that's valuable there. I would think that sociology is probably the most valuable discipline when it comes to understanding how to effectively wield like political advocacy. But there's also psychology, there's also political theory, there's also anthropology. People, I feel like there's a very supremacist mindset in philosophy where they act as though like an understanding of philosophy is like a bedrock of the understanding of everything else. And while that may be true from an epistemic sense, when it comes to making actual change and actually affecting the world positively, that's not the case at all. Most people who have done a tremendous amount of good for the world don't know shit about philosophy. I doubt Martin Luther King Jr., the Mahatma Gandhi, I doubt these people could talk about the moral realism and grounding your axioms epistemically and no, of course not. It's just about
True.
wanting to do something and doing it as hard as you can.
True, but you can say that about basically most academic disciplines, I would say, like all the STEM fields specifically. Most leaders aren't experts, and that's the reason why the technocrats think that their thing's going to work, because they think if you just put a scientist in charge, then that's going to fix things. So I think that while it's true that philosophers themselves aren't the ones who are doing the work, I think that their work, as well as the work of basically any other academic field, heavily informs the sort of strategies that people use going forward, politically speaking.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, philosophy is the bedrock of everything. We couldn't even the philosophy of science is completely predicated on epistemic, values that are philosophically determined. There's no other groundwork to be had. The issue I have is when people act like you need to have a fucking master's in philosophy before you're allowed to talk about anything concerning your values. That shit's cringe. I'm a sociology major. I'm academically trained in sociology. I have a piece of paper that says I am. And if somebody like comes at me and they're like, "Hey, I believe society should be like this," I'm not going to fold my arms at them and go like, "Huh. Well, do you really think you have the baseline sociological education to make a claim like that?" No, I'll just try to engage with the ideas. And even though a lot of the shit they're going to say is probably in some way going to be founded on the values that are practiced in sociological research and have been for a century now. I guess I'm just more interested fundamentally in like good conversations and bringing people to mind states where they're able to best affect the world in a positive way, and not so much in like everyone paying due diligence to the glorious enlightening power of philosophy.
Well, I think the difference between, like, for instance, you and Rem's positions is that you're more concerned with the rhetorical sort of aspect of just conversations in general, whereas Rem is very focused on the sort of substance of the ideas themselves and wanting to substantiate them as best as possible.
Rem the Bath Boy is a bitch. That's the main difference. He won't come on my streams. You know that? Every other stream he'll go on. He loves talking, loves the sound of his own voice.
I'm a fan.
He won't come on my stream.
I'm a fan of him, okay? So just...
All right, that's okay if you're a fan of a beta, but
well, I'm a fan of a couple betas, both you and Rem, right?
True. Compared to the God King JLP, we were all but betas.
That is true. That is true.
I just want it known, like, I have a tremendous amount of respect for philosophy. I mean, there's a reason, like, my two favorite, like, academics ever are Chomsky and Foucault. And they are as much philosophers as they are, respectively, linguists and political theorists. I have a huge amount of respect for the discipline, but I'm not a technocrat. I don't think that highfalutin academia is the glorious ivory tower from which the rest of us must, orient. I'm far more concerned with just using it to supplement basic political positions that I think most people could arrive at with a high school education.
I probably shouldn't bogart too much more time as other people waiting, but I just wanted to just do a couple final notes. Just one on what we've been talking about here. I think the big thing going forward is because it is so much easier to advocate for in the public eye, so to speak, than it was perhaps 100 years ago, where you'd have to go out into the town square and sort of shout your ideas and hope that people didn't think that you were just a crazy person. Because now you can just do that on Twitter, and now you can just do that on Twitch and things like that. I think that you do have probably more of a responsibility in your advocacy to at least do some foundational research. Now, the actual level of which of research you need to engage in before you can start going into advocacy is probably not as is probably not something that we can very easily define, but that's a conversation that can be had. And secondly, I apologize to everybody who thinks that my voice clip whenever you don't donate to Vosh is cringy.
Wait, your voice clip is the best. What are you talking about? Guys,
No,
I don't know
but
if you know.
it's always funny to me whenever I see people being like, "Oh, that fucking clip!" Oh,
Guys, sing along to it. Yeah, you're the toss a coin. Yeah, no. Yeah. Like, no, I do believe, and that's why my Politics 101 video started with axioms and the importance of holding like consistent values, like at a very epistemic level. Because if you don't, you're not a consistent political agent. So like, I'm not a philosophy major or anything, but that it is something I respect. That it's something I'm open to learning more about in the future.
all right. Thank you. I'll go ahead and
Yeah, have a good one.
Thank you, Mr. Lundy.
have a good one, Bosh. I love you.
Love you too.
Next question is from Dante. Dante, you are unmuted. Go.
Okay, so Vosh, you stated in a past stream that media, when created by like some sort of algorithm, would not be art because it is not communication between two like beings. But you've also stated in the last stream that whatever people call art is art. How do you hold these two views?
I hold them at arm's length and away from each other so they never meet. Okay, here's my real take, okay? Art fundamentally is communication. I think that's very, very important. I wouldn't consider a beautiful sunrise to be art. It can be beautiful, it can be inspiring. I don't think it's art. A painting of a sunrise, sure. And the reason for this ultimately is because I think that basically everything we produce, the very meaning of our existence, comes down to our ability to communicate with others who can understand us. It doesn't necessarily have to be humans. Maybe in the future it'll be robots or ghosts or whatever. But for now, humans. However, I do believe that art is whatever people consider to be art. So I guess I'm making a prescriptive argument then. Art should be considered a form of communication, because otherwise we risk considering things which are fundamentally devoid of interpretive worth art, and that to me is an undesirable outcome. So there we go. Okay, that's my thing. That's my art should be a form of communication, and by that standard, you know, stuff produced by robots wouldn't count. Just my
Okay. Trans rights. I'm done.
Trans rights.
Thanks, Dante. Okay. Next question is from Zetmo. Zetmo, you are unmuted as soon as I can find you. There you are. Okay. Go.
Hey, Vosh, how you doing?
Yo, doing good.
Yeah, wow, it's quite surreal speaking to you, given that I've been listening to your voice for like a year now. So,
listen, I revel in the opportunity to speak with you. Do you have the stream open? There's a bit of an echo.
I have it open, but it's on my earphones.
We fixed it.
It's all right. Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what is your experience personally with like trade unions and stuff, whether in college, as you call it in America, or afterwards? Like, do you have any advice, something like that?
For forming one or being a part of one?
Both, I guess. I mean, whatever you have experienced.
Well, I have no experience with trade unions personally. There were people who worked on and with trade unions who I worked with because it was relevant to my major, but I myself have never like been a part of one. I will say this though. I think that there's a lot of anti-union propaganda in the States. I don't know where you're from exactly. You said over there in the States, so I assume you're not from the States.
Yeah, despite my disgusting Britbonger accent, I am actually Polish. So
nice. So that's my ancestral homeland.
Yeah, I know you're really attached.
There's a lot of anti-union propaganda here in the States. I think that fundamentally, and without wanting to be too reductive, because I can only speak generally here, I think fundamentally it's very important to maintain the social acumen that makes a union possible. The more hierarchical an institution is, the less communal it needs to be. That's sort of definitional, you know. You don't have to know your boss for the system of boss-worker to work properly, because they don't need your input. They just need to know what you do. They just need to keep account of your ledgers. But when it comes to trade unions, there is a fundamental level of reciprocity and of mutual trust that is necessary in order to engage in collective bargaining. So with that in mind, I think it's very important to understand that your job as someone who's interested in being a part of or making a trade union is not just to build it, but also to build the social bonds with others who could either be a part of it or potentially be a part of it. I've heard a lot of stories about trade unions, or unions in general, going under because the people who formed it did so purely out of self-interest, and they didn't do a good enough job maintaining social bonds, and it just made it really difficult to form the mutual trust that is necessary for collective bargaining and other forms of collective action.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. As someone who is right now at university, it's hard, you know, because you want to form unions, even though people might not be really aware of what a union is, even at this point. Especially, you know, people that don't come from working class backgrounds.
We'll send Bernie Sanders over to you after we're done with him. Okay, he'll red pill the
Yeah, I mean,
population.
the Labour Party have just elected a fucking right wing careerists to lead it, so we'll see how we can do. But yeah, thanks very much and good luck with it.
Love you, buddy.
Thank you, Zema.
Okay, great. So up next is Alexander Swede. He wants to ask you a question. We'll unmute him now.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Alex.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Vash, thank you. First thing first, how are you doing? Hope you're doing well. And second.
I'm doing great. Thank you.
All right, that's nice. So I want to discuss with you something specific regarding your ideology with the whole social. I myself am proficient at robotics and automation.
Yeah.
I made robots that will automate task A, for example, from A to Z, from 0 to 9 or 10, whatever you want to say. I don't need workers. I'm seizing all the means of production as an individual. You won't get anything, nor anybody else. It's an example, by the way. How are you willing to take those things from me? I don't understand your anarchist idea when itself. I don't see logic within anarcho-socialism. Doesn't make sense.
So you're saying in a socialist society, what happens if you single-handedly develop an enormous amount of productive power without any other employees? Like you invent a technology or you design something that is unprecedented and you end up becoming a major industry player and it's entirely of your own volition.
I monopolize the whole industry.
I don't think it's possible for any one human being to monopolize an entire industry without other supplementary workers. So generally speaking, if you were, so hypothetically, if you were somehow able to do this, which I find very unlikely, but if it's possible, you would obviously be in an extraordinarily high tax bracket. In a market socialist society, there would probably be a flat 100% tax bracket at some point so that nobody could accumulate an extraordinary amount of wealth completely on their own. Also, if you were yourself, dominating an industry, you were monopolizing it, there would probably be government regulations put in place to break you apart. Or impose other forms of regulatory sort of action, just as a matter of preserving the economy. I mean, monopolies are bad, even for capitalist economies. So I can imagine there would be regulatory agencies that would be capable of dealing with that specifically.
All right, here's the thing. Monopolies already do exist in many chunks of the world, first world countries. I'm talking about Europe. I'm talking about certain parts of the Middle East. China is already monopolized by the whole of the CCP. As we can see, they had shut down everyone regarding the Kong flu. That's another story. You see in Saudi Arabia, which is a developing country, right, they have the governing body, which is the monarchy, having a monopoly over the oil pricing by their leading company, Aramco, and they do own about, I would say, 87% of the whole GDP of the country. When it comes to another example is Europe, a first world countries, I would say. Certain groups of people own about 80 to 70% of the whole wealth of the European continent, not even countries, exceptions of actually Norway. And if those people can just round up themselves, they can literally obliterate everybody. The whole thing with the socialist and communist idea already failed a long time ago. It's a
Wait.
capitalist
Okay, you're
society.
you're pumping a lot of stuff in there. Okay, so first of all, I don't know what the existence of monopolies today has anything to do with how this would work in a socialist society. The reason why monopolies exist today is because of class distinction between the bourgeois and the proletariat, and a wide variety of other reasons. Obviously, very complicated. But like, yeah, of course there are monopolies today. Like, I'm not defending that. With regards to, so you slid in like the failure of previous societies. A lot of people are really, really like quick to say like, the USSR failed, Venezuela failed. How will you not fail? But I noticed they never actually know what policies of the USSR or of Cuba or Venezuela or whatever led to the material development of those societies. In reality, what I'm advocating for, market socialism, worker co-ops all over the place, is A, not something which history has refuted, and B, not policies which have been implemented in these authoritarian faux socialist countries of the past. So the successes and failures of other countries is largely irrelevant to what I advocate for. I just advocate for an idea that seems to empirically work out pretty well. And part of implementing that idea would be breaking up monopolies, unquestionably.
Cool. Thank you, Alex. Okay. Next question is from Fluffy Dragon. Fluffy, you're unmuted.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the stream, by the way.
I know. I see you in chat.
Yeah. So my question has to do with when would be the right time to have open borders in society, and is it possible under capitalism to have open borders?
I do think that open borders are possible under capitalism. I think it has more to do with statehood than it does with the actual economic system. So, for example, open borders actually would bring about the most efficient form of capitalism possible. Capitalism is efficient in large part because it's a decentralized market, and that decentralization often entails the free movement of goods and services over borders. Allowing people to move freely over those borders as well would increase the degree to which capitalism is capable of meeting the needs of the population. So that's pretty cool. But in terms of whether or not the world is going to be ready for open borders anytime soon, that's different. That's difficult, you know? Like, right now the European Union has like pretty much basically a open borders compact amongst, their neighboring countries. If you're an EU citizen, you can walk over and just go to another EU country. It's great. But there are other problems. The EU has sort of designed itself in such a way as to only afford that privilege to countries that have similar economic circumstances. I'm speaking perfectly frankly here. If the United States just opened its borders and was completely non-discriminatory when it comes to who it allows in, everyone's a citizen as long as they live here, whatever, we would be absolutely fucking deluged with people from other countries. Of course we would.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that effective or open borders can only function after the entire world has been brought up to about economic parity. Not perfectly so, but a general level of economic parity that ensures there wouldn't be a mass flux of economic refugees into a previous nation state that would end up like crippling their economy.
So you think if we have different policies like under capitalism, open borders could be possible?
Even under capitalism, yes, I think so. In fact, judging from the fact that most of the prominent capitalist theorists have advocated for open borders themselves, usually you get this like Heritage Foundation, like libertarian policy, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Even like these people advocate for that, even though they're relatively socially conservative. Even racist people are saying sometimes that open borders are desirable economically, whereas there are plenty of non-racist socialists who will advocate like protectionist policies, which makes me cringe a little bit. But I don't know. It seems like a battle that is almost separate to the economic, paradigm we live in.
So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. But another thing, so you're against protectionism, as far as I understand?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, honestly. Well, thank you for answering the question.
Of course,
I
love you.
appreciate
Always
it.
happy to see you in chat.
Yeah, love the stream. Yeah, trans rights and all that, and fuck Nazis. Yeah.
True.
All right, thank you.
Be well.
Okay. Next question is from our mutual friend, Mr. Flamenco. Flamenco, you are unmuted.
How's it going, champs?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing fine. I enjoyed the Drunken Peasant stream. It was quite fun to watch. I actually have a question specifically about that.
What's that question?
So your thought process, or at least whatever you call a thought process, was that Ralph was a Nazi because his chat was communicating, quote, Nazi things in his chat. I'm just curious because like I took a look at your chat during the thing and they were like doing some open calls to violence against Ralph. Is your chat like a very sociopath friendly chat?
Yeah, I guess so. You got me. Speaking of sociopath friendly,
now I have one other
me
question.
And said I shouldn't
Is
be
this
giving
also...
you attention. So
wait, what now?
Your mom texted me and said I shouldn't be giving you attention. So you get one more and we wrap it up.
It's cute that you think you have a chance. The other question is, just quick question. With this like acceptance of sociopathy, do you guys have like an influx of like pro-pedophilia people as well? Because your statements rationalizing the consumption of child pornography was a little bit weird.
The only time I get an influx of pro-pedophilian people in my chat is when I end up calling out a Nazi and their fan base shows up.
Oh, that's a nice pivot. That's not answering the question.
No, that actually directly answered your question. Do you remember the question you asked me?
I wasn't. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks.
Got him.
No, seriously though, I just want to say, it is legit funny to me because every time I like go out and do market research on 4chan or something, or like Poll or 8chan back before it's purged and what have you, like the right is like fucking full of pedophiles. It's insane how like it's actually mind-numbing. It makes sense though, because they tend to have like this heavy incel overlap, and those communities tend to fetishize like youth, but like they go really far with it too. That's pretty wild. Yeah, kids can't fight back, Less discerning, perhaps. It's his best shot.
Okay, next question is going to be from Charmander. Char, you're unmuted. Go for it. Whenever you're
ready.
Go.
So, kind of to preface it a little bit, and this is something I've definitely looked at a lot. I appreciate you bringing in people like Chomsky, for example, and I really, to inform kind of the question, I really dive into recent work from him and Zizek, Chomsky on the critique of lesser evil voting, and then Zizek on kind of identity politics. Is it feasible, even for an average American in the modern liberal democratic landscape, is it feasible for them to even be informed enough to make a decision about what's best for them? Like when you speak about when you think about the obfuscation, the excess of information, and then kind of the concept of the individual and the identity and empowering people to vote, could this potentially just be just another vector for manipulation? Is it even feasible for an average American to be able to be properly informed, to feel confident in voting and meet that kind of standard that we talk about of a well-informed populace?
Yeah, that's a question that I get sometimes. It's something Destiny seems to take issue with as well. The idea that it's not actually possible for a citizen in a democratic country to even begin to understand the nuances of any given policy. So I have two responses to this. First of all, it's generally held amongst leftists that there is a reason why we aren't very politically engaged as it is. I believe, pardon me for sounding a little, I guess, nationalistic here, I think it's a responsibility of a citizen of a democratic country to be politically engaged. I think non-political, I think that's fucking cringe. Anyone who think like non-political, like what the fuck are you talking about? Non-political makes about as much sense as being non-food. It's just a part of life. It's something you need. It affects you. It affects every aspect of your life. I don't like it. Now, always there are going to be some people who are more interested in politics than others. That's fine. And not everyone has to be like me. So it's like someone who actually like engages with that. It's literally my job, you know. But there are many people out there who are so ignorant, it is shocking. And they are like 30 minutes of Wikipedia articles away from having like triple the education on the subject. It's of the opinion of many leftists, myself included, that this state of anomie, this alienation from political awareness, is a deliberate state of mind evoked by our system. After all, it is easier for the people in charge to do what they want if we aren't all, you know, real passionate about the political process. If everybody in this country voted, every single person in this country voted, it's unlikely there would ever be a Republican in office again. That's why Republicans work so hard at voter disenfranchisement. And likewise, and I'm of this opinion, if everyone in this country spent at least a week reading on history and political theory, Bernie Sanders would have been a shoo-in, in my personal opinion. Now, that obviously sounds very pretentious, like, oh, if only people knew more. But I do believe people have a fundamental material interest in making their lives better, and that society works best when they're able to actualize that interest. As it stands now, I don't think people are educated enough or socially incentivized to do that, and I do believe that somebody like Bernie Sanders would have been a better representation of their interest. So, to sum it up, ultimately, I do think it is possible to have a society where people are politically engaged enough to know what's going on. Even if they don't know all the specific policy nuances, they can still like know which senators and which Congress people they like, and they can put pressure on like, hey, we should move in this direction, that direction, even if the specific names of the bills and everything escape them. And I think it is a deliberate state of affair that this is being suppressed, and that in order to have a functioning democratic society, we need to encourage, incentivize, maybe even to an extent mandate a collective understanding of political theory.
Well, I can agree with you there on that point, that education could be could cross the gap there, that could make up the difference there. But I guess to drill it down on more, one thing that Zizek talks about and Chomsky talks about is this idea that the identity itself can become obfuscating, and using identity politics, like this kind of notion that, well, since they use identity politics, I see the right do this a lot, where they cry about identity politics and then assert a European white identity. So using these types of politics in general, is it worth the cost, or maybe the increased obfuscation? And by putting people in groups and not allowing them to feel that responsibility that you're talking about, allowing them to just go with this identity fused group identity they can just roll with, like, do you think maybe combating that a little bit more, or maybe positions on the left and the right both could try more to reduce the use of identity politics?
It depends on the type of identity politics. There are usually, when we talk about identity politics that break people up into groups over asinine differences, we're usually referring to liberal identity politics. Why is my audio so low? Hold on. It's strange. We're usually talking about liberal identity politics. That's here. Wait, hold on, just one moment.
Yeah, all good.
Let me cut the noise gate. I don't know why this is so darn quiet. All right. Does that sound better, folks? There, we'll try that. Okay.
Yes. You sound fine on our end.
Yeah. Well, whatever the case is, usually it's the invocation of liberal identity politics that makes these divisions. For example, Joe Biden, like, I'll have a woman president, like something like that. This shit is very, very cringe to me. When I think of identity politics, good identity politics, what I think about is recognizing that all of us are born into different circumstances, and sometimes, through no fault of our own, those circumstances will be used against us. They'll be weapons that can be used to divide and discriminate against us. So here, to me, is a bad id poll take. In order to fix racism, we need to vote Obama into office. That to me is a bad id poll take. Doesn't really sell the message right. What? So like a white person can't fix racism? I don't like that. To me, a good id poll take is to say we should vote for a president who cares about racism, because people in this country are discriminated against based on their race, and recognizing that is a step towards parity. We should identify the bigotry, but we shouldn't try to use it as a way of dividing people into camps. I don't believe in people being held individually responsible for the crimes of their group. I don't blame white people for racism. I don't blame men for misogyny. I don't blame cis people for transphobia. But I will blame transphobia for transphobia, racism for racism, and sexism for sexism. And to fail to acknowledge those systems, I think, is to do a fundamental disservice to people who are in need of help.
Well, yeah, and then I guess to wrap it up, just kind of to bookend it, because I think I agree with you pretty much 100% there. I guess the back end for me would be, it seems like you kind of, and it's a little bit leading, you identified maybe that there's like a common ground between those who might be politically informed, and it's maybe the rejection of some of these liberal perspectives. So moving forward with this, because you kind of hit on this too, this idea of these people who say that they're apolitical, right? And they give whatever reason for them being apolitical. How can you do more to address what seems to be a common critique from both the left and the right? How can we do more to kind of cross some of this middle ground to make people understand, like, this is your responsibility? It's not just about your identity, but like kind of like you said, the identity needs to be affirmed. How do we separate the term liberal from left? Like, because I think that adds a little bit to the galvanization.
Yeah, I don't really care about individual responsibility that much. To me, from a societal perspective, people behave predictably when put in predictable circumstances. It's just a matter of maximizing the outcome of those circumstances so you get the best possible people. I don't really care if people like take account for what they've done or what they think other people have done. It's just a matter of bringing about the greatest degree of social parity possible, because I think that's the most desirable society. I will say it is very important, I think, when engaging in advocacy, to do so in a way that feels inclusive. A lot of people will say like, oh, Vosh inclusive? Yeah, Vosh inclusive. I try to use language that I think will reach across the board a little bit. I don't like it when people make white Mayo side jokes or whatever, because there are a lot of conservatives who seem to legitimately believe there are people on the left who actually distinctly hate them for being white. And while I'm sure there are some people like that, I don't think that's broadly representative of our movement, and I think there are better ways we could target racism rhetorically than invoking this ironic, attack on white people, which can at times be funny, but I think is mostly cringe. There are people who make, money off of reifying these distinctions, though. For example, all the Gamergate people who pretended that feminism was like this anti-male movement. It's pretty weird. Actually, if you want a particularly funny little bit of, comedic juxtaposition, chew on this. You know which feminists are unironically anti-men? They tend to be TERFs, because TERFs, who are like the bastard off children of second wave feminists, usually believe that the subjugation of women comes from the biological failings of men, which is why, of course, they're anti-trans women, because they imagine those biological failings transposed across gender lines. But those TERFs, the ones who are actually anti-men, are usually the ones who end up siding with reactionaries and fascists. It's funny, that. Whereas most feminists aren't anti-men at all. Most feminists today are intersectional. So there's a lot of obfuscation here. But as a political actor, all I can really do is try my best to promote policies in a way that I think will get people on board with the right side of it, Paul.
Thank you very much for your response. And I think, like I said, you'd be encouraged to find people who maybe share a juxtaposition just slightly to the right, but still agree on a lot of things. And I appreciate your time.
Of course. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Okay, so next up is going to be Molotov. We'll unmute you now, and you ready?
Hey, BBY.
Hey, what's up?
So my question is, do you think that a U.S. annex of North Korea would be better for the people living there?
Oh, no, not this one again. Okay. It is possible to engage in interventionalist action in a good way. South Korea, not exactly my favorite country, but I do like it more than North Korea. South Korea probably
Why do you like it more than North Korea? I'm curious.
Because North Korea is a hellish autocratic society.
Right. But do you want to talk about South Korea? Because you mentioned South Korea. I'd like to talk about South Korea. South Korea is a fun topic.
Wait, so we're not talking about North Korea?
Oh, no. You brought up South Korea.
I just want to say, for example.
For example, right.
Right.
So
if we have a situation.
In this example, right. Do you know about the Jeju uprising?
I've heard rumors, but I'm not exactly educated on it.
Rumors, right? Okay, so it's basically a communist rebellion that occurred on Jeju Island in South Korea. from April 1948 to May 1949. The belligerents were, of course, the United States Army and the military government in Korea, which were trained by Japanese colonialists, right? And there were around at least several thousand insurgents killed. It was basically the entire island wanted to reunify the country with North Korea, right? Yeah, of course, the United States didn't. And so they basically killed around 2/3 of the population of the island. And another thing about South Korean human rights is that they have something called the National Security Act, which basically means that, well, in the 1940s, like during around the division of Korea, it actually basically meant that if you were reading Marxist or North Korean literature, don't fucking look at your watch. Marxist or North Korean literature, you could be put in a camp and executed. And once you were released, if you were released, that like you would be checked in like every month or so, right? And they would
Is there a
ask
question?
you
I'm
what
sorry,
you were
baby.
doing,
Is there a
who you-
question?
Oh, there's a wait. I asked the question and he answered the question, and now I'm
Wait,
going
I
on a
didn't
little
answer
bit
the
of
question. You interrupted me in the middle of answering the first question.
Did I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fuck.
Okay, listen. I don't like South Korea. I don't like America. I'm an anarchist. I don't like any states. Some are better than others, though. Okay. North Korea, not the best one. Actually, pretty darn bad. Really not a good state. Has America done a lot of bad stuff? Yes. Have there been a few times where American interventionism has actually bettered a country? Also, yes. I would say, and I'm comfortable saying this, that while the Nagasaki, Hiroshima, destruction, probably not the best thing, the interventionism we engaged in Japan after World War II actually did a lot of good for their country, taking them away from being a fascist autocratic empire and towards being, a fairly modernized democratic society. Now, is that maybe an unfair imposition of our power as like a world leader? No. They bombed Pearl Harbor. Fuck them. Now, I would say that if North Korea did something appropriately heinous, or if North Korea, I don't know, murdered, I mean, they put a lot of their people in concentration camps. If there was reasonable justification, if we could work perhaps with the South Korean government to put about a coup and maybe unify the country under South Korea, one Korea, I do think that would be better for the people of North Korea. Would it be perfect? No. Could it go wrong? Yes, absolutely. But if done well, could it perhaps be better? Yes, I do believe that.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I just want to.
Can I just say one more thing before I get cut off? Okay. Basically, the South Korean government has been working against the United States' wishes to reunify with North Korea. They've been working on diplomatic sort of conferences with North Korea, behind the United States' back. So that's just all I want to say.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to clarify this, okay? Because a lot of people, this is one of the things that bothers me about Tankies, and I'm referring also in large part to my chat here. A lot of people are very reflexively anti-American. I'm pretty anti-American myself. It's pretty cool. I've got the badge and everything. However, as a utilitarian, I have to recognize sometimes even utilizing bad systems can potentially do good. And would it necessarily do good? Probably not, no. Any U.S. interventionism in North Korea right now would probably make things a fuckload worse. But hypothetically, conceptually, are there ways that America can work with South Korea to destroy the North Korean government and bring about a better world? I do believe that is conceptually possible. North Korea is not a proletarian vanguard state desperately holding out against U.S. imperialism. They are a hellish nightmare state that subjects their population to every cruel inhumanity imaginable. This is not just Western propaganda. All existing evidence seems to suggest this is the case. The fact that they keep making nuclear weapon threats at their neighbors is already pretty good military justification to take action there. And with regards to Japan and taking over the Japanese government, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Japan was posting a lot of cringe back in the 1930s. I think that we were very well within our right to set them straight. Maybe not with the nukes, but with restructuring their government. Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Anyone who's like, I want to imagine like talking to like a Chinese peasant, like that's getting raped by like a Japanese soldier, and you walk up to them and you're like, hey, We could have stopped this, but U.S. interventionism is bad. So we're holding a blockade outside Japan until they surrender, you know? We're not going to fundamentally restructure their government. The greater evil would be imposing democracy on them. Like, nah, fuck off, dude. There are things worse than American imperialism sometimes.
Great, thanks. Okay, so this next question is from Martin WW. Could you elaborate on the incel crisis? Why are incels mainly men, and why is that loneliness becoming more of a problem in our society?
So there are two main problems. One, we've restructured what it means to be a woman, but we haven't for men. What it means to be a woman has changed radically over the past 60 years, since the 1960s, like hugely. This revolutionary, like the progress that's been done from in most of society. There are still some backwater parts of our country where women are treated like fucking decoration or whatever, but for the most part, the actualization of women has come a huge way. We haven't really done much to change the story of men. The modern woman is allegedly, independent and sexually confident and don't need no man and has control over their own reproductive rights and is confident and cocky and blah, blah. But the archetypical man these days, what does that even look like? Is it like the 1950s where they're supposed to wear a suit and be, charismatic and charming and sweep the girl off her feet? Are they supposed to be like paternalistic and subtly domineering? Like, what exactly is the narrative? And the answer is we don't know. We haven't developed a new male archetype yet, not one at least as holistic as the new female archetype. And that hurts people because people are, especially men, being pulled apart between what they individually want to do as actualized people, what society is telling them is right, what their family is telling them is right. There's just not as much synthesis there, and it's tough. This exacerbated by the fact that women are taught to be the sexual gatekeepers, and the fact that modern society has atomized the individual and made it less likely for people to be able to find emotional intimacy, ultimately means that men are getting less and less likely to be able to find romantic and sexual success, which is big cringe. That's a big problem societally. And it's not all the men's fault. Now, are a lot of the men who aren't able to find romantic success like dipshit, like sexist losers? Yeah, of course. But a lot of them aren't. So I don't think there's much utility in treating the entire group of them like they all deserve it because they're shit personalities. Is a very real social problem that I think we need to take seriously, or we're going to end up having some weird, bizarro world version of like the Chinese problem, Because during the one-child policy, they all killed their fucking girls, drowned the babies in the river, so they have more boys than girls in China, So now a lot of boys can't find a fucking date. It's not a good thing. You gotta be able to deal with that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so up next is going to be Fiona, and she has a question for you. We'll unmute her now. Go ahead.
Hello, Gingerman, sir. My Slavic culture opposes race mixing, and I was wondering, in your opinion, is it rational to oppose race mixing?
No, it is not rational to oppose race mixing, in my humble opinion.
Okay.
Can I follow up?
Chad. Yes.
Can I follow up on that?
Please do.
Okay. So as a liberal, at least socially, as a social liberal, I believe that we should respect individual autonomy and the ability for individuals to do whatever it is makes them happiest. I think ultimately our greatest responsibility is to our own self-actualization, not towards the family or the race or the state. I don't think you owe anything to the fucking race or the state. Maybe you owe a little bit to the family, I guess. I don't know. So with that being said, social pressures to avoid race mixing usually end up creating far more problems than they are told to fix. Now, if you want to make the argument that you should date people within your own culture, maybe that could be justified, because cultural differences can often be really difficult to overcome. But there are people who are of my culture who are not of my race. I'm in America. I grew up in Los Angeles on the West Coast. A lot of black and brown folk, Asian folk too, who grew up right next to me, exact same culture, very, very different race. So to discourage race mixing along those lines heightens and exacerbates an arbitrary social division, which usually leads to a reduction in the overall quality of society.
Cool,
Great.
Thank you. Next question is from Sidus333. As someone who's new to anarchist thought, how would law and the prevention of crime work in a stateless society?
I imagine that at least in an anarcho-syndicalist society, there would be a syndicate dedicated with like social engineering or social work, and probably one of those positions would be like a community officer of some kind. I still believe in law. I do think law is important. I do believe that people who can enforce the law are important. I just think it's important to place the law enforcers in a system of incentives that prevents them, or at least makes it less likely that they'll engage in bad behavior.
Can I ask a question? How can you say anarcho-syndicalist? How do you conflate the two?
What do you mean?
You can't have both. You got to pick one or the other, right?
Well, you'd have no. Why couldn't we have both?
Because if you have a syndicate, then it's not anarchy. It's not the same thing.
Well, anarchism is a political philosophy oriented around the reduction of hierarchy. If one believed that syndicates were necessary to maintain social order and, keep technology afloat, and didn't introduce much hierarchy, then I don't see why it would be incompatible. I mean, a syndicate isn't a state, but anarchists aren't against government. Nobody is against government. It's impossible to be.
Okay.
In my humble
Thank you.
opinion.
Next question is from Finnegan Fox. Finnegan, go for it.
Hey Vosh, big fan. I just wanted to ask what your opinion is on the content, I guess, Hunter Avalon uploads, because I know he's come a long way from where he used to be, but he still uploads a lot of criticism of feminism and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if maybe we give him a pass because of where he's come from.
I give him a pass because he's doing good. Obviously, I'm biased. Hunter Avalon and I are friends. We talk privately. Just because I'm a leftist doesn't mean that I'm not prone myself to biases. However, keep in mind, let's really think about it. Okay, ignore Hunter Avalon's actual positions, okay? Let's just say we're judging Hunter Avalon by his ability to help us to the greatest possible extent. If he just went dark for 3 weeks and then started posting full-on SOCDEM propaganda, he would lose his entire audience immediately. But,
right, yeah.
But if he posts videos which are still, they're still fairly conservative leaning, they have reactionary elements to it, and it slowly pushes and cajoles his audience, he has a much greater likelihood of bringing people over, much in the same way that Shoeonhead has done over the past couple of years, and much in the same way that I attempt to do. It's about meeting people halfway, because if you reach your arm out, even if it means sticking your hand in, dirty soup water or something, you can eventually pull them to where you're standing.
Yeah, I really like what Shu's done with that, too. And, all right, so thanks for answering. Big fan.
By the way, if you all want to consider continue criticizing Hunter Avalon's latest content, you're absolutely free to do so. Nothing is above criticism. Certainly not, me or him. Just I think recognize that the process of bringing people over and of moving over yourself is often arduous and difficult.
Okay, thanks. Shout out to Rufus, by the way. Bye.
Thanks. Okay, so sorry. So up next is Jonathan. He has a question for you. You're unmuted, I believe, Jonathan. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Immanuel Kant, but I was just wondering if you had any specific thoughts on him and his philosophy.
Listen,
if at all.
I'm not a big moral realist deuterino myself. I'm not a big deontologist. But I'm sure, listen, I obviously haven't read Kant. I'm sure he's a very smart man who said lots of important stuff. But from my limited understanding of philosophy, what I have read of him doesn't give me much descriptive power in helping me do what I want to do.
So you would fall more on the, just to follow up quick and then I'll go, you would fall more on the materialist rather than the idealist?
Oh, very, very much so. Very much like material dialectic, utilitarian, act utilitarianism, bringing people over. I don't have much. I guess there's always a possibility that somebody will one day give me a really good argument for it, but until then, I'm pretty solidly locked in on being a utilitarian.
All right, thanks for that.
Cool. Okay. Next question is from the Beholder. Beholder. We're going to meet you in just...
I behold. Don't laugh.
Go for it.
Oh, I'm right here. Oh, sorry. Sorry, did I cut out? I apologize. Hi,
you're
Vosh.
good. Howdy.
Yeah, my bad. So I'm actually new to like the whole like bread tube thing, so I'm not really familiar with all of your justifications and stuff. So I apologize if you've rehashed this before in your videos or something.
Ain't
But
nothing.
my question for you is really, it's really your the reason why you like anarchism, right? I'm also attracted to it, but I'm interested, right? Why you liked it. So like, do you like it because like you want like rights and liberties for individuals, or do you like it because you find that it just fits in nicely with your ethics, or perhaps it just supports some other value, right? That you have.
It just fits in really, really well with my it fits in really well with my ethical system. I believe very strongly in individual liberty and personal freedom, and I believe in the developing a society in which people have the ability to form their own communities. I don't like forced communities. I think they bring a lot of harm. These are what would you call? Oh no. What about, you've all read Kurt Vonnegut, the Bakunin? What's the name for the false spawns? Whatever. One of you knows what I'm talking about. The idea of people like bonding over their race. What the fuck does race even mean? Like what? Skin color? Oh wow, we both burn the same rate. Over your nation? What? You're born in the same geographic fucking. All these, like, even family. I don't really like forced bonds with family either, which is why I'm kind of a nuclear family abolitionist as well. But the bonds you form individually, the ones you choose to form, the friends you choose to make, I think that's special. And I think those communities are a lot healthier. I think that anarchism just slides in nicely with my ideology. Oh yeah, false karas, the Grand Falloon. Yes, thank you, Dylan. Flexing theory muscles? That's not theory, it's a book. Anyway, sorry. That's something that I care about very much. And I'm very, very open to having my perspectives changed down the line when it comes to the implementation of a post-capitalist society. Maybe anarchism doesn't end up being the most effective system after all, but it's a conversation I'm looking forward to having, or to hearing of people having, after this immediate obstacle is overcome.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it. I'm here.
All right. So I agree with most of what you said, like even like the utilitarianism part. I'm still I'm a little bit hung up on the whole like liberties thing and like individual rights and whatnot. Like, do you have like I don't know, like some sort of like justification for like giving individuals rights? I mean, wouldn't it benefit the collective to diminish those rights and have people democratically decide what individuals get to do?
Well, I would want any society to determine its laws democratically, but I think it's ultimately a goal to maximize happiness. And I think individual liberty ultimately is the system which maximizes happiness. It's a false dichotomy, I think. Some people believe that to emphasize individual liberty is to destroy the systems of community that make people happy. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think people operate on incentive structures. If you give people the freedom to make good life decisions, and the tools to make those good life decisions, it'll be infinitely more satisfying and fulfilling for them as a person than it ever could be if you just slot them in, especially since there's a decent chance if you force a person into a social role, they're actually not going to like that social role very much. They're going to rebel against it, or they're going to live in discontent for the rest of their life. Yeah, it gets like pretty complicated, but I think individual liberties are ultimately like the best way of securing freedom and happiness. Well, of course, freedom, but of happiness as well for the population. That's what I care about ultimately.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
Thank you. Okay, next question is from Sorix. Sorix, I'm going to unmute you in just a second, and go for it.
Hello, Boosh. I have
Howdy.
a question. How are we going to cope with AI replacing the workforce in late stage capitalism model?
I think that's great. Automation is the liberation of the proletariat. Why should human beings be wasting their time and creative fulfillment doing tasks that AI can do. Now, mind you, if AI automates a system, that doesn't change the total amount of wealth or productivity in society. It only redistributes it. If you have a factory that produces 10 cars an hour and it has 100 people working there, and then you just take away the people and make it all done by robots, you've made the system more efficient, which means that there is now more wealth in society and more capacity for productivity than there was before. Automation does not need to hurt the worker. Only in capitalism could a system that makes our economy more efficient cause a labor crisis.
May I follow up with a question?
Absolutely.
So, are you pro universal income?
In the long term, yes. I worry about how universal income can be used as a carrot in a capitalist society. I worry that there's a degree of complacency that could be brought about if universal income is used as a way of keeping the proles alive without necessarily actualizing them or giving them an opportunity to engage in self-fulfillment. It would just be like the government just has to keep like a minimum number of people like alive to do work AI can't do, and everyone else can just sort of wallow. I worry about the toxic incentives that might bring about, but I'd have to do a lot more research. It's really, really complicated.
One more question to follow up with that, though.
Yo.
Is it cool? Can I do it, or?
Yeah, go. Yeah.
Dobie, is it true that you can get Moderator if you send nudes?
I wish. I feel like I'd get more news if that were the case.
I can vouch for this. Yes.
Thank you.
The only news I get are like horse porn, which is unfortunate.
Vouch, thank you for
no problem.
That.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. Okay, so up next is antidepressants. We're gonna unmute you. Go ahead, Annie.
Annie, you're unmuted.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, Vosh. How are you doing?
Doing great. How about you?
Doing really well. Really quick question. So, in most socialist theories of exploitation, it's centered around a difference in bargaining power between capital and labor. Marx, in particular, states that the reason for this was a history of blood and fire, where primitive accumulation led to workers working for capitalists or starving. This is obviously a false choice and prevents the worker from having true freedom. So my question is, if we were to redistribute capital equitably across a society and move towards capitalism from there, do you think that there are still plausible arguments for socialism? Do you think that there are plausible arguments against capitalism? If so, why? If not, why not?
I don't think there's any way to equitably distribute capital within capitalism. I mean, I believe in democracy. As it stands, capitalism cannot coexist with a democratic workplace because it means you would no longer have, the bourgeois class expropriating the labor of the workers. I don't think there is. It's like, wait, there's an example I've given before. It's possible to imagine a society in which such a thing is brought about without completely eliminating capitalism, but it's about likelihood and incentive. For example, it's entirely possible to have our level of technological and social development, our level of civil society, in a feudalist country. If we, for example, never abandoned feudalism and the monarchy, we still lived under an absolute dictator of a monarch, and we had lords who managed our workplace, it would still technically be possible to have that and to also have, free education, good health care, good level of civil society, individual liberties. The issue is it's very, very unlikely because the authoritarian structure of a feudalist society kind of systemically disallows those developments. And in the same way, it might be very slimly possible to implement the improvements socialism would seek to implement under a capitalist society, but it would be virtually impossible because it's antithetical to the nature of the economy we live in.
So your concern is that under capitalism, even if we were to plausibly equitably distribute these resources, well, one, you don't think we can, and then you think that capitalism is inherently exploitative regardless of whether or not we could do this, or no?
Yeah, capitalism is 100% inherently exploitative, but I also don't think it could maintain any just distribution of resources. Capitalism always trends towards the accumulation of capital in the hands of a smaller and smaller number of people. That just seems to be a law of the system. I don't think that can be managed or dealt with without fundamentally changing the nature of our society. Likewise, with the disproportionate influence that business has on lawmakers or a wide variety of other things, I just don't think that I don't think those can be addressed meaningfully without making systemic changes to our system.
Okay.
In my humble
That makes
opinion.
sense. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Next is MK Vanguard. MK, you are unmuted as soon as I can find you. There you are.
Hello.
Yo.
Hey, Vosh. Good to finally talk to you. I've listened to your content for a while. You kept me from being bored at work many times, so thanks for that.
I listen to my own content pretty often, too.
Right on. So I wanted to ask you about guns and revolution. Just a disclaimer, because I don't want to get in trouble or anything. I'm talking like strictly theoretical. Political violence is bad, all that. So my understanding of your take on guns is that you believe like there's going to be a coming revolution in developed nations because of like growing wealth inequality and like the effects of climate change is going to have on having a refugee crisis and all that. And the working class should be armed in preparation for that kind of thing. Is that a pretty accurate characterization?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted to ask. So the way I imagine like a revolution, like in a developed country, would be it would be like pretty different than anything that's ever happened before. Like it's not going to be like 1917, like Red Army in the Kremlin, or like in a poor country like Rojava. So I would imagine that something like happening in a developed nation would be like the United States would be way different than anything we've seen before. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so given that's the case, like we don't really know what a revolution would actually look like in a developed nation. Like I would imagine maybe something like general strikes or like more aggressive protesting and probably like cyber warfare, like Edward Snowden, anonymous type things. So given that, the whole like preparing to arm yourself for a coming revolution in like real world politics feels kind of larpy to me, given like the real world harm it seems like having so many guns has in the United States. So I just wanted to know what your perspective was on that.
Well, if we're just looking at the calculus of the situation, if you imagine that proletarian ownership of firearms could eventually prevent our country from falling towards fascism and then bring about a socialist revolution, we're potentially gambling with hundreds of millions of lives then and billions of lives from that point forward. This is one of those big civilizational changes that I think immediate sacrifices are worthwhile. That being said, I don't think that the existence of guns as it stands causes as many problems for this country as many people seem to believe it does. When I think of what causes gun, so for example, gun crime in this country, most of it not exactly happening in highfalutin, wealthy neighborhoods. Usually it's being done in the projects, and usually it's being done between gangs that have guns so they can defend their territory that they defend because there's stuff worth defending on it, like drugs they buy from cartel merchants and then transport into the US. Ultimately, much of the gun death in this country stems from the drug war, which was a deliberate collection of policies brought about to exacerbate the oppression of people of color, particularly black people. I think that there are ways for us to substantially reduce the amount of gun death in this country without taking away guns from good, honest citizens. Getting rid of the drug war, it's a big one. Getting rid of the NRA. The NRA is run by lunatics who unironically push like hyper chauvinistic propaganda about how owning a gun is like getting a fucking penis extension, who fearmonger relentlessly about immigrants and Democrats and Obama's ghost coming to take your weapons. The NRA is a piece of shit organization that should be obliterated, unquestionably. Likewise, if we do more to address toxic masculinity, there's a reason why many of these gun deaths are taken, are committed by men. This would also go a long way towards reducing the suicide rate with guns, because suicidality is highest, I think, amongst white men. Guns are a very effective way of killing yourself, as it so happens. Ultimately, I think there are a lot of factors here that share comorbidity with gun deaths that we can address without necessarily impeding our Second Amendment rights. And that's important to me because I do believe that even if there's 10% chance that widespread gun ownership will eventually be a necessity in preventing some kind of authoritarian takeover in this country, I think that's a worthwhile bet to take.
Okay, makes sense. Can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
So in Canada, they have like what is it? They have gun licensing. Like you have to go through a process. You have to like take a written test as well as like you know, a test to show you're like competent with guns. And I could be mistaken. I think they might even have like some mental health screening kind of thing going on. So I want to ask, does that seem like something you would be on board with if we did licensing here in the United States?
I'm not necessarily opposed to licensing as long as the I don't know how many gun deaths are caused by improper use of guns, you know? I don't know how many lives that would save. I guess it would save some lives. How many lives could it hurt? I would be okay with that as long as it didn't give the government the ability or opportunity to prevent people's acquisition of firearms if they were in a different political class, racial group, something like that. As long as it isn't something the government could use to means test firearm ownership.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, that's all I had, Vosh. Thanks for talking to me. Keep up the good work. Please don't get COVID.
Doing my best. Don't leave the house that much anyway.
Right on.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Baby Girl Kitten. How do you feel about celebrities spreading fear-mongering of Vosh? You actually getting sick?
I just got the sniffles. All right, what was
no.
was it? How do I feel about celebrities?
How do you feel about celebrities fear-mongering during this pandemic, like Madonna? And do you think that this will make social media stars like PewDiePie, Hatsune Miku more authentic than Hollywood celebrities?
Well, I think that I guess I can add myself to this list of online celebrities, kind of. Just, I mean, I'm not PewDiePie sized or anything, but I feel similar pressures. Nobody likes traditional celebrities much anymore. I feel like, okay, you know how there are a lot of people who talk about like the normie like based gap, where an increasing number of people are going to turn to the internet for all their media consumption, and it's going to be more and more difficult to relate to people who use more conventional means of, you know, entertainment. I guess the internet's pretty conventional now, but like not many people online follow celebrities like in the traditional sense. I feel like authenticity has always been kind of part of the sell, you know? I know that's one of the reasons why people watch me and why they would watch any streamer or YouTuber. I mean, look at me. I'm here. I'm live right now. They can chat. I can read their thing. They're talking to me directly, and I can talk to them directly. What, it was Beyonce? You can go to a concert maybe, and maybe you'll see like her leg or something. I don't know. With regards to fear-mongering, though, I don't know if that's a tremendous issue. I think that a little bit of fear-mongering right now might be... I don't know exactly what Madonna did. I don't know what exactly happened. But I think it's valid to be paranoid in these times. If they're, like, spreading misinformation, that's obviously, like, really bad. But online figures also spread misinformation all the fucking time. I just came off the quartering video. I don't know if YouTubers are a paragon of reliable information dissemination, you know?
Cool. Okay. So we've been going for almost 2 hours. I'd keep you on here all day if I could, because I feel like some of these people have brainworms. We do have the service coming by at 6 p.m. Pacific. So you okay with just getting in a few more questions? And then,
yeah, I'm good to go for... Hey, how about this, okay? I'm good to go for another half hour. If that's
awesome.
okie
You're
dokie
too
with
good
you.
to us.
I'm gonna go. Listen, I've been busting. I'm gonna go for a piss real quick. I'm gonna be right back,
this is
okay?
sharp.
Just give me 60 seconds. Easiest way in the world.
You may do this.
Easy peasy.
Okay. All right, we're back.
Cool. Okay. So ask yourself, you're unmuted, go
Oh
for it.
no.
Damn
Hi.
it, Vosh.
No, I
How are
should
you
have said
doing?
no vegan questions. Hey, what's up, man?
Oh, you had a chance to escape the AMA and everything. Not much, just the usual. Coming back with the same kind of argument that we didn't get to finish off last time because I was cucked by my phone dying.
Listen, okay? Maybe we can do a truce, okay? I've been unironically buying Beyond, I Want to Be a Girl. I've been buying Beyond Beef and the
Whoa,
fake
what's a girl?
veggie chicken patty shit so I can reduce my meat consumption. Now that I have the money, I'm doing my best. It doesn't taste that bad. Yeah, I'm putting work in, okay? We're getting there.
Hey, well, I mean, that's actually really good. Obviously, well, I should say it's better because it's not good if it's still, causing a bunch of murder, but it's better than it was before. So, props for that. Well, I mean, if that's the case, you might not object to the argument anymore.
Oh no, what's the argument? I probably still do. Hit me up.
Okay. Well, it's four premises and a conclusion, right? And it's formally valid. It's just going to be R implies P, S implies not Q, R, S, therefore P and not Q. Just going to refute the premise of this argument you gave against veganism a long time ago, which maybe you don't hold to anymore.
Yeah, I'm going to try my best.
Here's the first one, Bosch. So, if avoiding meat produced through capitalism maximizes well-being to a high degree, then we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism.
Okay.
We agree about that.
Well, that's false.
Wait. Okay. Wait. Hold on. Okay, let me get out my notes. All right. Okay.
Go for it.
Give me again.
If avoiding meat produced through capitalism maximizes well-being to a high degree, then we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism.
Okay.
If I knew you were going to go all out and start typing, I would have typed it out so I could just copy paste it to you.
Okay, so I think I take issue with this one. So I don't necessarily. Okay, wait. So by oughtn't, do we mean it would be better if you did not, or it would be immoral if you did?
We mean immoral here. We talked about this last time. You have a certain threshold where you say it's actually immoral to do the thing.
Yeah, okay. Then in that case, I think I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to disagree with premise A. I'm going to say that the degree to which consuming a commodity in capitalism hurts the world is not the only factor that we can use to determine whether or not it is immoral to participate in that system.
So I thought that you had said that you're a utilitarian and that there's a threshold for any action where it causes enough suffering that it's immoral to do the thing.
Yes, but I would argue that threshold has already been met for other commodities that we all consume. And for that reason, unless we're willing to bite the bullet and all feel like shit over everything that we do, because we also consume shirts that are made in sweatshops and what have you, then we have to recognize that there is a degree of ethical alienation we experience from the production process of the commodities we consume.
Okay, so the problem is that I tried to explain this last time, but you're actually contradicting yourself. So if we make a universally quantified statement for all X, if X maximizes well-being to a high enough degree, then we oughtn't do X. Then we say there's an X that maximizes well-being to a high enough degree, but it's not the case that we oughtn't do it. That'll just be a logical contradiction. You can't say that to put it in natural language instead of being formal about it, right? You can't say that for any action, there's some threshold where the thing becomes immoral, but then there's an action that there's no threshold.
Well,
I'm not.
I'm not saying
who's talking. I'm just talking to Bosch. Sorry.
I'm not saying it's not a matter of whether or not it's a threshold. I believe that the consumption of commodities even if the production method of those commodities is unethical, is done in a way which alienates us from the ethical consequences. So, like, for example, I don't think a person is committed an immoral action for buying a t-shirt from Target, even though they're financially propping up an institution that procures those goods through massive levels of exploitation in the developing world. So my argument here would be that what we do to animals is bad, and we should work to reduce the harm that we produce with regards to that. But I don't believe it makes one immoral to not do so. Like donating, for example. Like, should we donate money to charity? Yeah, probably, if we can. But does it make it immoral of us not to? Well, I wouldn't make that argument.
Okay, but is there a threshold where any action becomes immoral if it causes enough negative utility?
I think I would make a special exemption for the consumption of commodities because we're alienated from the actual the immorality of the process of production. After all, the harm.
So, to be clear, if the bullet you'd have to bite there is if eating meat causes galaxies of people to be holocausted, it's still okay to eat meat. It's not something we ought. Or is there a threshold?
No, yeah, I would bite that bullet. If I lived on Earth in the year 2 billion or something, and an entire galaxy is economically devastated to produce commodities that I consume there, and I was born into it, and I was taught that it's normal to consume those commodities, I would have to say that while it would be good to not do that, I don't think it would be immoral to do that. I don't think people should be considered to be immoral agents for participating in society.
Okay, so just to be clear, you have an option to buy one piece of meat and you could get your other food, let's say for free, Vosh. Someone offers you a free meal, or on the other hand, you can pay for a piece of meat. If you pay for the piece of meat, infinite people will be tortured for infinite time. That's ethical on your view to eat that piece of meat?
Well, that's
buy
the
that piece of
difference.
meat?
That's not how commodity production works. For commodity production, the immorality
That doesn't matter,
takes
though.
place
That's
before.
not. I'm not to be rude. That's a slight red herring, right? Because the whole point is, if you say there's no threshold, I can make the consequence as bad as I want, and you have to say, yeah, it's not immoral, right? So I can say one bite of meat, infinite people tortured forever, and you have to say, oh, there's no threshold.
But for me, it's not about the consequence. It's about the degree of alienation that we experience with regards to the harm done by the commodity production. If, for example, like I was like, hey, do you want $1? I'll kill 1 billion people. No, that'd be immoral, of course. Like if I had to press, like, here's the option. I press a button, and I press it, I get 1 million ducks, but I kill 1 million people. Pressing that button is immoral. However, if I am a humble businessman in America who, through the utilization of economic engines which lead to the deaths of millions outside of my country, am able to become a millionaire, I don't think that act in and of itself makes that person immoral, even though the system itself causes harm. Because I think we're alienated from the consequences. I think it's a matter of collective responsibility versus individual responsibility.
I'm still just not clear. I mean, are you still a utilitarian or not?
No, I am, because I think that we get more utility from recognizing that there's an alienation from commodity forces here. Like, for example, like here's like here. Wait, if I may.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So you like walk around the street and you see a homeless person, right? And you can drop them a 20 or you can not. It's probably a good thing to drop the person a 20. I think most people would agree, right? They probably need it more than you do. But I wouldn't, if we walked by and you didn't give them a 20, I wouldn't like say like, hey dude, what the fuck? I thought you're supposed to give them a 20. What the fuck, dude? And for me, the reason for that is because there isn't necessarily a perfect syllogy between what makes something good and what makes something immoral if not done. You know?
I know, but we're not talking about just what makes something good. I understand that on your view, if it gives utility, it's good. If it doesn't give utility, it's bad, right? And I had people in the comments when I posted a conversation, the last one we had, where they think that I don't understand what you're saying. So I'll say it to you and you tell me if I understand what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. So you're saying positive utility, good, negative utility, bad, but there's also a threshold on the positive and negative side where the thing actually becomes immoral to do. And by immoral, you mean something different than just bad. You mean like you have a personal, like you would condemn someone over it, something like that, right? So there's good and bad, but then there's also a threshold where you say someone is actually like, you really deem them a fucked up person for doing the thing.
Yeah,
right?
but yeah, I would agree with those
Okay.
on the so long as we add the addendum that there are ways in which a person can be alienated from the consequences of their actions, such to the fact that it doesn't reflect on their morality.
Okay, but if you say, right, if you say that there is no threshold, right, because so there's multiple problems. So firstly, there's the problem of saying that there's a threshold everywhere and then saying that there's a case where there's not a threshold. That creates a contradiction. But if you want to become something other than a utilitarian there and add something else in, you could try to do
Wait,
that.
that's not a contradiction. I'm still a utilitarian. I believe that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. The reason why folks say that is because it's unhelpful and counterproductive to make everyone believe they personally are bad people because they buy from retailers who make their money off exploitation. Anything you buy in a capitalist system is reinforcing exploitation. The goal here shouldn't be to frame people as being immoral for participating in these systems. The goal should be to help them to understand that finding alternatives to participating in those systems would be better.
But is there a threshold for any action where it is sufficiently bad for utility that you'll say it's immoral?
Yeah, unless we're alienated from the consequences of our consumption, in which case I don't think it really matters how much harm is done.
So what you actually mean is no, there's some situations where there isn't a threshold.
Yeah, if in the specific case if we're alienated from the consequences of our... Because anyone else would have to agree with that. Do you think you're a bad person for buying T-shirts like from Target?
Wait a second. I want to just press this line of questioning, right? Sure. So if you say for all actions there's a threshold, and then for some action there's not a threshold, that's a logical contradiction. Now, if you want to revise the position and just say there are cases where there's no threshold, you don't want to make the universally quantified statement that there's always a threshold. That's fine too, but then you're going to get that reductio. So just to be clear, I just want to make sure what you're saying, and then I want to deliver where it leads, okay? You're saying that there are some actions for which there is no utility threshold. Doesn't matter what the utility is, you're not going to say the thing is immoral, right?
Yes, there are some actions that regardless of the utility they produce, or disutility, I don't think it has any consequence on the actual morality of the action. We know this for a fact because if you're at the top of a mountain...
Can I follow up though?
Well, I just want to clarify, like, we know this. If you're at the top of a mountain and you toss a rock off of it just nonchalantly, that rock could just land in a ditch, or that rock could end up braining a grandma. Wildly different outcomes, but you're alienated from the consequences because the way in which you engage in that action didn't really foretell who would end up getting hurt from it.
Okay. Now, all I want to say, right? So there's kind of two things. So the first is if you make a universally quantified statement that for any action there's a threshold, and then you say there's an action where there's not a threshold, that's a contradiction. But if you want to get around that contradiction, because first of all, can we please acknowledge that's a contradiction, just as a starting point? Because this is just there's no argument to be. Sorry, why am I? Someone's echoing.
Safety.
Hello. Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, sorry.
I
It
was
someone
never
else
that
there.
hard on harping. Okay, so listen, I love you, but this is one of the things that leads to people calling you insufferable. So when I say, just to be clear, when I say, yeah, I do think that there's a threshold between disutility and immorality, but also like there are certain ways in which we can be insulated from the consequences, like moral consequences of our action. Like it should be pretty obvious. I'm saying like there is an extenuating circumstance where I think that my general standard is inapplicable. Like obviously, I'm not trying to simultaneously nail a contradiction where like I've never harped in too hard on like the universality of my statement. I'm only trying to apply the idea of there is no ethical consumption under capitalism broadly to veganism, you know?
Okay, but we understand that if someone were to make a universally quantified statement that for any action there is this threshold, then say there exists an action where there's not a threshold. We understand if someone were to say that, that would be a contradiction.
Okay, how about this? Here's my new statement.
Please, Vosh, I don't want to be rude, but just please answer that.
Wait,
we understand
trying to
that
clarify.
would be Well, just start with a yes or a no, though. Right.
I forget the question. Hit me with it.
Right. But yeah, because I just for the sake of dialogue, we have to listen to each other. It can't be you just like I don't want to be rude.
Wait,
I like
wait,
you.
Wait. Are you accusing
you
me
to
of not listening to your arguments?
I'm accusing you of rambling off instead of answering.
I don't think I'm rambling.
Wait,
off.
what?
Okay, wait. Here, this is look perfectly. All right, look in situations
it's a question
where
on the
people
table.
are morally culpable for their actions, I do believe there is a threshold which determines the distinction between disutility and immorality. In situations where they are not morally culpable, which I would argue the consumption of products, the production of which we're alienated from, would be, I do not believe that is the case.
Right. So I understand now you're making a new statement, but we understand that the initial statement, even if it's just down to you phrasing what you actually believe imperfectly, is contradictory. Right? We understand that if someone says, for all X, if X decreases utility to if you say for any action there is some threshold where it becomes immoral, and there is some action where there's no threshold where it becomes immoral. I feel like I've
clarified this though.
Well, the clarification that I'm looking for is, yes, that's a contradiction, but I'm revising my position. That would satisfy.
Because I don't think I ever hardcore nailed that position. I don't think I ever used the word.
That's okay. That's why I'm not trying to hold you. That's why I'm not
absolutely
trying to
hold me to this position.
Degree.
Are you kidding me? I've addressed my new position. You're let's go back. Do you recognize this was a hypocritical? No. Okay.
No. I said, do you recognize if someone were to say?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Now let's go to the new one. Right now, this is the problem. With the new one.
Isaac, 1 second. We do need to get a couple more people in here, so if you guys can wrap. The next
okay.
one.
Well,
we can hit it. The final blow.
Okay. So the final blow is this: if you're saying that there is no utility threshold where the action would become immoral, then I can put whatever the fuck I want on the other side. They rape you to death. They rape every single human on the earth to death. There is infinite suffering, trans genocide, all of the people you stand up for in your videos, all tortured brutally. And we actually have infinite universes filled with infinite amounts of those people being tortured. You have to say, yeah, that's not immoral, right? If buying a piece of meat, if buying a piece of meat causes that is not immoral. That is what you're committed to if you're saying there's no threshold.
If buying a piece of meat contributes to an industry that does that, I think there's an important distinction there. Then yeah, I would bite that bullet. If I was born onto a planet where it was socially normalized that people eat meat, and for some reason the production of that meat required the suffering of an entire galaxy behind it, I still would not argue that the person who engages in that form of consumption would be immoral, because there are probably a large number of extenuating social and cultural factors that have normalized that process to the extent that we could derive greater utility from focusing on positive, restorative arguments, like it would be better if we didn't, rather than trying to morally condemn people who did. That is a utilitarian argument.
The whole condition is that it gives you infinite negative utility, right? That's the whole idea. You can't appeal to positive utility when you say there's no threshold of negative utility where this thing would become immoral. You're actually Molyneuxing right now, which is where you add in something that's not entailed into the hypothetical to make the bullet bite look less bad.
What if I could convince more people to stop eating?
Well, come on, I let you finish. Let me finish. It doesn't matter if you say, hey, well, there could be this positive utility also, because that can be removed, right? I can just say, oh, well, how about the situation where there's fucking none, right? And you still have to bite the bullet.
Okay. Again, there is not a direct union between the morality of an action and the amount of utility it produces. Obviously, if you could eat meat and you would contribute to an industry that would produce
I'm not talking about eating meat. I'm talking one bite.
Sure.
One bite.
Sure. I don't think that distinction matters.
One bite.
Okay. Yes, you can consume meat to any amount, and doing so would perpetuate an industry that would enable suffering on a galactic scale, or universal scale, or maybe multiple parallel universes that we have somehow stripped together into some sort of strange meat production facility. I don't know. Yes, even if you got infinite disutility from any consumption of that commodity, I would still argue it does not make the person consuming it immoral, assuming that it is societally normalized for them to participate in that process. And I ask you this: what if you could get less people to eat meat by arguing positively, as I do, that it's better if we eat less meat, rather than negatively, as you often do, claiming that it is immoral to eat meat? In that case, a system which you claim enables a disutility would actually bring about better outcomes than your outright condemnation of that system.
Okay, so I got muted there. So the point that I was actually making before I was so rudely fucking muted by whoever thought that was a nice idea. If you're saying there's no threshold, we can forget we can forget all of this shit about the system. We can just say one bite of steak causes infinite galaxies of suffering. And you have to say that's ethical. Without rambling, without anything else, is that ethical, yes or no?
That's not the syllogism that I proposed.
Sorry, the exact claim, if we want to be precise, is you will not say that that is immoral.
No, but that's not what I was talking about. When you do realize that, like, even as a vegan, eating meat. Wait, dude, come on. Eating
you're
meat.
dodging me, though, Vosh.
I'm not dodging. You misunderstand my position. Wait. This is simple. So I've said this before.
If there's no threshold, because Vosh, you're not answering. If there's no threshold, I can make the negative utility infinitely high, and the action can be one bite of a piece of steak.
I've acknowledged that, but I have to clarify that it has nothing to do with the actual consumption of the product and has everything to do with the system you're supporting by buying it. You do know that as a vegan, eating meat doesn't make the world any worse, right?
Answer. I just want you to clearly say yes or no to this.
No, because your question isn't relevant to my position. It has nothing to do with eating it.
You don't get to just say irrelevant.
All right, get him out of here. Get him out. He's triggered. Get him out.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. So I just want to clarify I just want to clarify for me. I have no idea why the fuck he's really nice to me, DMs. I have no idea why he was being such a cunt there. But so yeah, to be perfectly clear here, there's a huge difference in the degree of ethical alienation between doing a bad thing and contributing to a system that does bad things. So do remember, if you're a vegan, like even if you're a vegan, eating meat doesn't make the world a better place. Like the actual consumption of the meat's dead. Doesn't hurt anything. It's that when you buy meat, you're giving money to an industry that is incentivized by the profit motive to kill more animals. That's the harm. The harm isn't done when you eat the meat. You're just contributing to a system that affects harm. So likewise, if I could purchase a commodity and the act of purchasing it killed an entire planet, that'd be bad, of course, because that immorality is on you. But if I could purchase a commodity and that commodity is sold to me by a company and that company is owned by a company that has subsidiaries in an industrial company that has an imperial agenda in a different planet where they hurt lots of people, that's a huge level of ennui that prevents, I think, at least in my opinion, that person from being a bad person. Now, would it be better if they didn't buy the thing? Yeah, sure. But at the end of the day, all of us right now are wearing or using items which were made, in my opinion, unethically, either through slave labor or through sweatshops or through the exploitation of resources of the third world. And we purchase these things, and I don't think this makes us bad people. Maybe it would be better if we didn't do it, but I think ethics is a lot more complicated than that. So that's all I'm saying out there. Everyone, if you can, don't eat meat. It's better to not eat meat. But I don't think you're a bad person if you eat meat or dairy products or whatever.
Awesome. I don't know why the vegans are so upset today. Thank you.
I tried to respond as good faith as I can. I have no idea. I feel like he was really interested in pushing me into a box on that one and got really mad when I tried
to. Just one of the yes or no bullet biting thing. Yeah, I get it.
I'm good for longer now, by the way. I didn't expect that. Give me another half hour. Roll me out. Or 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Rebellious Spirit has been waiting very patiently. You are unmuted.
Hello?
Howdy.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Vals. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. I've been watching your videos for quite a long time. I have to say, you're a fantastic debater. You're really brilliant.
Thank you. I've always loved public speaking. I'm glad I get to do it for a job now.
Yeah. I've got a question. Actually, it's a question. Okay. The first question is, you know how the left, they tend to talk about minorities, don't they? Like non-white people, transgender people, LGBT, and people, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've got a question. How would socialism improve the lives of the disabled, like those with disabilities?
I don't think it fundamentally would. I don't think it's capable of solving that problem entirely on its own. Now you can, well, actually, let me be a little more charitable. I think it's possible in any socialist society where the workers collectively own the means of production. It has been shown that in worker cooperatives, when there is an economic downturn, there is a greater likelihood of everyone who works there taking a hit to their income rather than them starting to fire people. I think that's very special. Really think about it. When traditional businesses start to run low on money, they immediately think of preserving their higher end income. They start firing people. Worker co-ops don't do that. I think this trends towards a greater degree of in-group sympathy that would be beneficial towards the disabled, in large part because even if the disabled are technically less economically productive than like non-disabled people, pretty much by definition that is the case because the economy is organized around the productivity of non-disabled people. Now the profit incentive is not the only predominant factor. There is now also the human connection that workers have amongst one another to protect each other, to make sure that they have decent levels of livability, to the extent that they'd rather take a pay cut than like fire the disabled person. So I think that attitude.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to say that in World War II, did you know they actually used just Down syndrome people to help look after the children?
Like back at home? That makes sense to me. Aren't Down syndrome folk usually pretty nice?
Yeah, they're pretty nice. But really, that's one thing. Another thing that's not talked about is that in America, there was actually very discriminating people with disabilities. You know, when people were going to America to flee for protection against the Nazis, the America would basically exclude and throw out anyone who had a slight bit of disability.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest reasons why disabled people are treated so poorly is because they're not as efficient in our society. They take more time and effort to take care of. That's not the whole story, but that's a part of it. I think a society that to a lesser degree prioritizes the relentless accumulation of capital, as a socialist society would be one which intrinsically treats disabled people better. And I also think the goal of a socialist, which is to reduce hierarchy, at least along class lines, coincides much better with anti-ableist advocacy than the goal of a capitalist, which is to maximize profits.
Okay. I've got a second question that's all related to the first one, which is, you talk about intersectionality.
Yeah.
Where does that disabled people, like for example autism, go into it when it comes to intersectionality? Because for example, we live in a neurotypical society, which basically pressurizes neurodivergent people, autistic people, into conforming to social like standards, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm autistic. A lot of folks sometimes they're real surprised. I mean, listen, you can talk. I mean, maybe my girlfriend will come on sometime. She can talk about it. I'm plenty autistic. Okay, I'm hiding my power level on stream. But no, I mean, any intersectionality that doesn't include the rights of the disabled is trash, garbage intersectionality. At the end of the day, our goal should be to make life better for folks, right? If we're doing that along lines of identity and axes of oppression, and we're ignoring, well, like I guess people like me to an extent, just any disabled folk, I feel like we're kind of missing the point. We're only letting the cool minorities in, but somebody who maybe takes a bit longer to express themselves or something like that, those people get left to the wayside. That's pretty cringe to me. I want to talk more about ableism on my stream. I feel like I should.
Yeah. That would be great, because I often feel like disability politics isn't really talked about much when it comes to minorities and the left.
There are. I think there is a fair amount of ableism on the left. It's something that we can work on, definitely.
Have you heard of a channel called Libertarian?
A channel called Libertarian
Socialist Rants.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, he's actually done a really good video about autism and how anarchism could improve our society.
Then I think I should check that out. This is definitely something I'm a little bit less educated on. I'd be happy to familiarize myself a little.
And I've got a question. When it comes to incels,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that has any connection with like, autism or special needs?
Yeah, definitely. Autism isn't just a genetic thing. Autistic characteristics can be exacerbated due to social features. At least that's my understanding of the condition. So yeah, if we have a society which is growing increasingly atomized and alienated, it makes sense then that people aren't getting the sort of social juice they need to shore them up and decrease the likelihood of them developing autism. And I just want to say, I don't think being autistic is bad or anything. I'm happy with how I am. I like being how I am. However, I think it's also good to build a society which gives everyone the greatest possible opportunity to feel socially fulfilled.
Oh, that's nice. I just want to say
you cut out. You'd like?
Oh, you cut out there.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was going to say I would love to have a conversation with you. Like, there's just so much to talk about.
Yeah, I can't make any promises because I feel like every day I wake up and I have 80 emails of people I have to turn down for stream conversations. But even if we don't end up talking about this, then it's something that I want to address on my stream more often in the future. Definitely.
Okay. So one more question. Last question. Do you think it's possible that euthanasia is a slippery slope to eugenics?
Yeah. There are some forms of eugenics I think are defensible. Like if you're trying to weed out really, really like specific genetic conditions or something like that. I think that can be defended. But I think we have to be really careful about how that gets implemented, because invariably any eugenic policy is going to end up being like, arguments are going to be made. This means that we should like normalize society, I think frankly, you know what? I think the world is made better for the existence of disabled people. Maybe the disabled people themselves disagree with that sometimes. But I think the world is generally a more beautiful and vibrant place when we have people who have different ways of looking at the world. Yeah, guys, when I said conditions, I meant, like cystic fibrosis or like really rare, like you die when you're 6 years old shit. Not fucking if you have autism, okay? Yeah, I think the world is made better when we have that variety.
Yeah. Also, maybe it's a topic you may not know, Mark, but I think you should look into how special needs are treated in mainstream academia. It's pretty awful.
Oh yeah, no, I have no doubt. I'll look into it for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Be well.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Likewise. Have a good one. I love you.
Thank you. Love you too.
So patient. Okay. Next question is from RV. RV, go for it. RV.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, what's up, Vosh? So I just want to know, and like I'm devil's advocating. I'm not like a big. I think Nick Fuentes is sort of like detestable in a lot of ways. So I'm actually here just to ask like the elephant question, the elephantine question, right?
Yeah, hit me up.
And so I asked it like this. I said, do you think, or do you see the Nick/Catboy thing as potential sabotage by the Australian? In the video, it's clear he waits for an opportunity to catch shy and awkward Nicky Boy off guard, using the vague social awkwardity of their outing to stream out-of-context exchanges to the public. Much the same as in middle school or high school, when you approach someone and say, hey, to which they reply, oh, hey, and then you reply, no, I won't suck you off, bro, to embarrass them within earshot. Do you see how this was probably intentional internal sabotage, or do you stand by your assertions basically surrounding all of that?
So, 2 points I need to make. First of all, I don't know why the Catboy Kami guy would want to sabotage Nick Fuentes, considering they're like friends and both Nazis. I feel like that'd make more sense if like the streamer guy was like a dem soak or a lib or something, and they were trying to like shame Fuentes. But so I'm not sure about that. I don't know if like Catboy Kami wants like more of a relationship they actually had. I don't know. But secondly, I've never made like the prescriptive claim that like the evidence brought about by that video guarantees that Fuentes is gay or that it's bad to be gay or anything like that. All I wanted to really showcase the video that I did is that he'll call people degenerates for way less than the shit that he does, all the Catboy posting, All the complaining about girls, but then like, haha, cat boys are good, and then he actually goes on a fucking 10-hour date with a cat boy. I'm just saying, like, if I did that, and I'm openly gay, he and his clan would call me degenerate for it. So I just thought, I thought it was a little funny, a little weird, and I hope eventually he comes to terms with who he is inside.
Okay, yeah, no, literally, I just wanted your take on it as it related to like how I phrased it, because that's the essential. That how I characterized it is basically the core, most civil characterization from, say, like the opposition to like, let's say you or other similar like-minded people, right? Like, so I was just sort of characterizing it. I was just curious.
The cope is
Yeah,
hilarious.
thanks for
by
coming.
the
That's
way.
it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Huh?
The cope is really, really funny, by the way. There are a lot of if there are people who are saying like, oh, whatever, like I don't care about this whatever, Fuentes is based, like, okay, cool, whatever. But there are people who are unironically arguing this doesn't look gay as fuck. Those people are coping like hell to me. These are people who will go out like on 4chan and like somebody will be like green posting about how like they have a friend, and like one time they like opened up to their friend about like their depression, and they'll call him like gay or a fag, like the whole comments through or something. But then Fuentes does this little catboy jumpa, and they're like, oh, it's not gay. That's not gay. Anyone would act like that. That's just funny to me. The cope is very amusing to me.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah,
problem.
and
I
also
love you,
thanks for
buddy.
coming. Cool. Yeah. You too, bro. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, again, like I'm not a proponent. I was just wondering because I think it's. Yeah.
World's full of beautiful people. Okay,
Yes, it is.
I'm just here to make friends.
Thank you, RV. Okay. So I think we're gonna have to wrap it up just because we've got the surf's coming on in like 30 minutes.
Oh, you meant EST then. You said PST before.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. All right. That makes a little more sense. Yeah, hit me with like one or two more or something like that.
Okay, cool. Let's see if we can get some quick ones in here. I've got a question from Mr. Secco. How would gun control work under your ideal?
I don't know if I would call it gun control, but I've always been a big fan of armories. See, the reason I like guns is because I think it's fun to shoot them. I mean, of course, everyone likes that. Some folk need to hunt with them, but let's be real, not many. But ultimately because one day it might be civilizationarily necessary for us to defend ourselves. So with that being said, my goal, my ideal would be bunkers. You would have communally organized like safe houses or centerpieces where like we would just stock up the weaponry, and you could go out. You're like, hey, can I have my gun? I want to go shooting today. Fine, cool, dandy. I think it would do a lot to reduce crimes of passion, and no one would be forced to put their guns there, but it would help some people, I think, especially suicidal people. I can speak to this personally, like as someone who's grappled with depression at some points in my life. I've been doing great lately, by the way, but at some points, there have been points in my life where I've thought like, I like guns and stuff, but I don't really like the fact that I have one in my house right now. I just don't like that. I don't know. I just worry. I don't necessarily trust my impulse control. I think for situations like that, it would be really beneficial to be able to keep your guns in an armory because, impulse decisions are a lot harder to pop off if you have to fucking drive 20 minutes over to some bunker out in the field and then talk to like a clerk and ask for your gun and then go back home. Like it's way, way harder,
Cool. Okay. Last question
Hit me
is
up.
from Animated Emperor. Go for it. Mr. Emperor. Oh, no, if you don't... Okay. This guy's been asking for like half an hour. That's okay. I'll ask it for him.
Wait. I got it.
There you go. Okay, no pressure.
Sorry, I pushed the talk on. All right. My question is, do you think that we can have a European Union-like system with Canada, the United States, and Mexico?
I think I would like that. One of the main problems with like, NAFTA?
Yes.
Yeah. One of the main issues with like our trade policies, locally in our hemisphere, is that they're very specifically like a transnational corporation thing. Like that's very, very specifically something that is done it's entirely in the realm of big businesses and trade agreements they can barter, but it doesn't affect the average person. Or I'm sorry, it affects the average person. It doesn't involve the average person that much. That's the issue to me. If we were going to engage in like a real NAFTA, I would like to see something like that, For example, there's no real reason why we need to maintain a contiguous border with Canada. Canada and America have similar enough economic situations. It's not like 1 billion people would pour north or south. And while there are different laws, of course, I think there could be a lot of positive change brought about by that. Now, American pharmaceutical companies don't want you to be able to go up in Canada real easy, admittedly, but I think that good can be done there. Mexico would be a little bit more difficult because Mexico is literally like in a state of constant civil war. But I feel like if we invested in Mexico and worked with them over a course of maybe 20 or 30 years, we get rid of the drug war, so we stop paying money to their cartels. I think we could make a proper country out of them, because the cartels are empowered largely because of us. We hated black people so much we imposed laws that ended up devastating the country to our south, which then hurts us because it means we get more illegal immigrants rather than legal immigrants. It means that we have to spend money and time and manpower policing our border. Jesus Christ, what if we just invest in our neighboring countries? We benefit from that. And then maybe we could have a strong economic alliance that precludes not just the rights of corporations, but also the rights of individuals to travel, to go to the Gulf of Mexico, to go diving if they wanna, to form business relationships across borders. I think that's a delightful idea.
I totally agree. Like literally the same exact mindset. And one more question. I wanted to get your thoughts. What do you think about like globalist ideology or just globalism as a whole?
It's done right now to meet the interests of the capital owners, which is my issue with it. I would want a globalist society even under socialism because we have one planet and it's a beautiful planet, I think, at least parts of it. And it's sad to me that we've erected so many walls to impede the ability for the individual to experience as much as they possibly could. Every wall around the world, the wall between the wealthy and the poor, the wall between the borders of different states, all of them impedes the rights of individuals to obviously varying degrees. I don't want globalism just because it's economically efficient, though it absolutely is. I want globalism because I think it leads to the greatest possible level of individual actualization, of cultural intermingling, of essentially of freedom and well-being. To me, it's more of a personal thing than it is an economic thing.
Again, I totally agree with that. I was more thinking about it in the capitalistic sense because of if we raise the higher standing everywhere, we in turn like indirectly have our quality of life like risen as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we benefit from that tremendously. Not to mention, sorry, I'm gonna close the window because the fucking kids, these fucking social distancing my ass, Jesus. There we go. It's economically efficient. It brings about better outcomes. I think it's just a slam dunk, honestly. The idea that protectionist policies are going to bring back some sort of golden age of American manufacturing is just delusional. I'm in favor.
All right, got it. All right, that's all I got.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Love you, Mr. Emperor. Okay, with that, we're gonna wrap this up. Vash, again, thank you so much for coming on. We got a lot of
Thank you.
chuds on here that need to be re-educated.
Exactly.
Guys, if you're in here, please follow Vash's YouTube channel or subscribe to it. That's linked in the AMA Questions channel. If you're on the stream, you can find us at discord.gg/politics. We'll be having the service up for the next 20 minutes or so. Vash, again, love you. Thanks again for coming on.
Of course. Have a wonderful day.
I'm sorry. One more thing. I promised Isaac I'd ask. Isaac wants to know if you'd be open to a one-on-one debate at some point.
Isaac?
Ask yourself, the vegan guy.
Ask yourself?
The angry vegan.
Well, he just messaged me saying that he considers me like a dishonest actor or whatever.
Oh no.
I feel like I've answered this the greatest extent I can. So my humble and respectful answer is no, because I don't think we would get anything out of it. But I respect the work that he does, and I hope he continues promoting the good cause of veganism wherever he goes.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Vash. You have a good day, okay?
Thank
All
you
right, I
so
love you.
much.
Have a good one. Tell Lance I say hi.
Will do.
Love you.
Right. I thought they were in good terms before this. Yeah, I thought so too. I don't know. I'm trying my best over here. You know that? I'm just trying to make good arguments. I think that was a good Discord AMA, by the way. I liked it.